What is up everyone, Xeno What If here. If any of you guys are new to the channel, like and subscribe. If you guys want to see more content, then leave a comment down below and to give me more video suggestions. To bring in the movie called What If Tucker, UNSC, Londo Bell arrived in Cross Ange. This is the biggest crossover ever. Such as characters from Red vs. Blue, Tucker and Locus from the UNSC forces from Halo Wars 2, including Mobile Suit Gundam characters from the Universal Century such as Londo Bell forces of Amuro Ray to Hathaway Noah from Hathaway's Flash and Gundam Meisters from Mobile Suit Gundam 00, Setsuna F. Sae, Lacan Stratus real name, Neil Delandi and Tierra Erde. Chapter 1 Into a New World. The sun hung low over Blood Gulch, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and amber. It was the kind of sunset that used to mean something, the end of another pointless day of simulation warfare, another round of insults traded across the canyon, another night of listening to Church complain about everything. Lavernius Tucker stood on the roof of Blue Base, his aquamarine armor catching the fading light. He wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about blood. The flashbacks came without warning, fragments of memory that weren't entirely his own. The cold presence of AI shards slithering through his neural pathways. The feeling of his body moving without his consent. The look on Sarge's face when the energy soared. Tucker squeezed his eyes shut, forcing the images away. He understood now. Understood what the meta had felt. The hunger. The noise. The desperate need to make it stop, no matter the cost. Irony's a bitch. He still visited the grave every day. A simple marker near Red Base, where Sarge had fallen. Tucker never said anything. What was there to say? Sorry I murdered you, while a chorus of dead smart asses piloted my body. Yeah, that would go over great. Griff had left, packed a single bag and took the first transport back to Earth. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. Didn't look back. Simmons was still here, holed up in Red Base, tinkering with equipment that didn't need tinkering. A ghost tending a ghost town. Maybe I should go too, Tucker muttered to the empty air. Just leave. Start over somewhere. Change myself. He laughed bitterly. What kind of job hires someone like me? Required skills. Interstellar war crimes, involuntary mass murder, being a puppet for ancient AI fragments. Competitive salary offered. Yeah, right. A sharp crackle of electricity cut through his thoughts. Tucker turned. Through the open door of Blue Base, a familiar blue light was strobing. The teleporter, that piece of malfunctioning junk that had caused nothing but trouble since day one. You gotta be kidding me. He stomped inside, ready to give the ancient machine a solid kick. Can't I get 5 minutes of? The vortex didn't wait. It lunged. A coil of blue velvet energy, shot through with violent green lightning, wrapped around Tucker like a whip and yanked him off his feet. What the? The world dissolved into a deafening roar and a kaleidoscope of wrenching colors. Tucker tumbled through the void like a sock in a cosmic dryer. His armor clanging against nothing, his internal organs trying to swap places. Oh God, why is this happening to me? He yelled into the chaos. Am I that much of a fucking bad luck magnet? I swear to God, if someone calls me a black cat, that is just fucking racist. The vortex twisted, spun, and finally, with a sound like the universe itself clearing its throat, spat him out. Tucker hit hard pavement back first, the impact driving the air from his lungs in a pained oof. He lay there for a long moment, staring up at a sky that was wrong. Pale lavender, streaked with high, neon pink clouds. Finally. Goddamn. He pushed himself up, wincing. I was getting fucking dizzy. He was in an alley. Narrow, clean, the walls made of some smooth, pearlescent material. The air smelled like ozone and something sweet. Flowers, maybe, but not like any flowers he knew. Combat check. Old habits. Okay. What the hell? Still got my armor. He patted himself down. Frag grenades. Check. Assault rifle. Check. Magnum. Check. His hand went to his hip, where the familiar weight of the energy sword hilt rested. A soft cyan pulse glowed in response. Energy sword. Check. Nothing missing. He stood, looking around. But where the hell am I? Tucker crept to the alley's mouth and peered out. Blood Gulch was gone. This was a city, a real city, but like no city on Earth he'd ever seen. Towers of gleaming crystal and polished metal speared the lavender sky. Between them, sleek vehicles hovered along glowing lanes of light, silent and graceful. The sidewalks were crowded with people in flowing, brightly colored garments who walked without looking at each other, absorbed in holographic displays that floated before their eyes. And then he saw it. A woman across the street gestured impatiently at a hovering taxi, and a small, holographic keyboard shimmered into existence before her. She typed, and the taxi responded. A man further down casually lifted a stack of floating crates with a flick of his wrist, guided them through the air, and set them down perfectly. Tucker's jaw dropped behind his helmet. Well, that's not something you see every day. His stomach chose that moment to announce its presence with a loud, demanding growl. Right. Priorities. Find food, then figure out where, and when, the teleporter had dumped him. He walked for a while, taking in the impossible city. No fast food places. No familiar golden arches or Taco Bells. But he spotted a building with a sleek, elegant facade and large windows showing well-dressed patrons inside. Fancy smancy. Probably expensive. But his stomach didn't care about budgets. Here goes nothing. The moment Tucker pushed through the shimmering door field, the gentle hum of conversation died. Every head in the restaurant turned. Eyes wide with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and outright disbelief tracked him as he clanked across the polished floor in his high-tech aquamarine armor. He was a walking, heavily armed anachronism in a world that had clearly moved on. A waitress with silver hair and subtle circuitry tracing her temples approached, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Sir, welcome to the luminescent pearl. A table for one." Tucker ignored her, glaring at the staring patrons. "Oh my god. What the hell are y'all staring at? What the fuck are y'all looking at?" The silence deepened. Forks hovered midway to mouths. The waitress's smile vanished, replaced by tight disapproval. "Sir, I would recommend you not behave like that." "Why?" Tucker demanded, turning to her. "For one, it is disrespectful to use such abrasive language in the city of Arsenal." "Arsenal?" Tucker echoed, confusion cutting through his irritation. What kind of name for a city is Arsenal? A collective, sharp intake of breath swept through the restaurant. The waitress's eyes widened. She took a small step back. "I'm sorry, what?" Her voice was hushed now, edged with something like fear. "Either you've hit your head, or you must have lived under a rock on a fringe moon your entire life." Tucker threw his hands up. "No, I have zero clue what exactly you're talking about." He scratched the side of his helmet, a gesture of pure bewilderment. "I just got here." The atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to something colder. More wary. The other patrons were looking at him like he'd just admitted to being contagious. Tucker's appetite vanished. Whatever this place was, he wasn't welcome here. "You know what? Forget it. I'm out." He turned and stomped back toward the door, the stairs following him like lasers. Chapter 2. Ready for trouble. Tucker pushed to the front of the murmuring crowd, his confusion mounting. This wasn't a simple police standoff. The energy in the air was thick with fear and a cold, institutional cruelty. The scene clarified. A woman, her face streaked with tears, was being restrained by two officers in the sleek white armor of the Arsenal police. A third officer was calmly, methodically, prying a bundled blanket, a baby, from her desperate grasp. "No, please. She's just a baby. Her name is Sophie." The mother sobbed, her voice raw. "She hasn't done anything." The crowd watched, a mixture of grim acceptance and muted horror on their faces. Tucker's jaw tightened behind his visor. This was fucked up. Then, a new figure swept into the plaza. A woman, flanked by attendants in elegant, subdued uniforms. She was beautiful, with an air of porcelain delicacy and dressed in finery that screamed aristocracy. The crowd's murmur shifted, a ripple of surprise and deference. "It's Lady Angelis," someone whispered, awed. "The princess heiress." Tucker's initial reaction was a familiar, knee-jerk appreciation. "Whoa, hello." But it died instantly as he saw her expression. It wasn't compassion. It was a cold, clinical distaste, as if examining a stain on the pavement. The mother saw her, a flicker of desperate hope in her eyes. "My lady. Please. My child." Angelis stopped a few paces away, her nose wrinkling slightly. "Be silent," she commanded, her voice clear and icy. "I am sorry for your attachment. But this filthy creature is a Norma. Its very existence is a corruption. It must be purged for the purity of Arsenal." The mother's hope shattered into pure, unadulterated rage. "You bitch!" she screamed, and in her frenzy, she grabbed the only thing at hand, a ceramic bottle of milk from a nearby vendor's cart, and hurled it with all her might at the princess. The crowd gasped. The bottle sailed through the air. A flash of aquamarine intercepted it. Tucker's armored hand snatched the bottle out of the air a foot from Angelisa's face. He stood there, holding it casually, the unexpected savior in a high-tech shell. The plaza fell into a stunned silence. All eyes were on him. Now, Tucker's voice crackled through his helmet speaker, a lazy, teasing drawl cutting the tension. "I don't think we wanna cause anything ugly, shall we? I mean, milk. Really? That's a waste of a perfectly good, whatever this is." The lead police officer recovered first, leveling a glowing stun baton at Tucker. "Who the hell are you? And why are you interfering with arsenal purification protocols?" "Okay, wow," Tucker said, placing the bottle gently on the ground. "That's kind of fucked up to say, even though I am wearing high-tech armor. And to be honest, I don't even know what her kid did to you." "Purification? You're taking a baby from its mom. That's some mustache-twirling villain shit right there." Another officer stepped forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "Are you stupid? Retarded? That is no human child. It is a Norma. A mana user. A genetic aberration. Its very presence destabilizes the mana lattice that protects our city." Tucker tilted his helmet, the gesture perfectly communicating baffled sarcasm. "Okay, seriously. Are you guys high as fuck, or are you just snorting some premium space drugs? You're scared of a baby because it might have magic cooties." A ripple went through the crowd. No one talked like this. No one acted like this. Princess Angelis just stared, her perfect composure finally cracked by sheer, dumbfounded incomprehension. The lead officer's face hardened. "You know what? Fuck it. You want to do this the hard way. We'll do it the hard way. Apprehend him." 3 officers lunged. One raised his hand, and a lattice of shimmering golden light, the same light of mana Tucker had seen earlier, erupted around Tucker, meant to cage and paralyze. It fizzled against his Mjolnir armor with a sound like shattering glass and dissipated into harmless sparks. Tucker didn't even flinch. He looked at the fading motes of light, then back at the horrified officer. "Seriously? Is that all you got?" He chuckled. "Summoning sparkly barriers. That is the weakest shit I've ever seen in my life. You guys would get massacred in a straight fight against a grunt with a plasma pistol." The officer's face twisted in fury. "If you do not bear the light of mana, then you are an abomination, and you deserve to." The sentence ended in a wet thwack. A high-velocity round tore through the officer's helmet from above. He dropped. Chaos erupted. Crack, crack, crack. More precision shots rang out from a high vantage point. Police officers dove for cover as their comrades were picked off with terrifying efficiency. The crowd screamed and scattered. Tucker's combat instinct snapped into overdrive. He didn't know who was shooting, but they were thinning the opposition. That was an opportunity. He surged forward, not toward the shooter, but toward the mother. She was crouched, frozen in terror, clutching her baby to her chest. "You too. Come with me if you want to live," he barked, his voice all business now. He didn't wait for an answer, grabbing her arm and pulling her towards the mouth of a nearby service alley. She stumbled after him, too shocked to resist. More police reinforcements poured into the plaza, only to be met with the same ruthless, pinpoint sniper fire. Tucker caught a glimpse of a figure in gray and green camouflage, perched impossibly still on a distant gargoyle. The style, the precision, it was achingly familiar, but impossible. No, it can't be. The roar of engines drowned out his thoughts. Not hover cars. The deep, throaty growl of UNSC atmospheric thrusters. A Pelican dropship, its hull scarred and painted in the familiar olive drab and red trim of the Spirit of Fire, descended through the neon clouds like an avenging angel, its ramp already lowering. From the hold, a figure in crimson Spartan armor waved. "Hey, you, get the civvies in here, now." It was Douglas 042, his voice gruff and urgent. Behind him, Alice 130 and Jerome 092 covered the perimeter with raised rifles, and a squad of hardened Marine veterans in body armor provided suppressing fire towards the police cordon. Tucker's mind reeled. Red team. Here. A laugh, half hysterical, bubbled in his throat. The teleporter's malfunction had apparently tossed more than just him into this bizarre world. And I'm guessing this is our getaway. Tucker yelled over the din, shoving the mother and her baby towards the waiting Marines. A strong hand pulled them safely into the Pelican's belly. He took one last look back at the plaza. Princess Angelis was being ushered away by her panicked attendants. His eyes tracked up to the rooftop. The sniper was gone, vanished like a ghost. A burst of police fire sparked off the Pelican's hull. "Tucker, move your ass," Jerome's voice commanded. Tucker turned and leapt, landing solidly on the ramp as it began to rise. The Pelican's engines flared, and it shot skyward, leaving the chaotic plaza of Arsenal shrinking below them. Inside the shaking troop bay, surrounded by the faces of legendary Spartans he'd only heard stories about and a terrified Norma mother clutching her child, Tucker slumped against the bulkhead. "Okay," he muttered to himself, the adrenaline starting to fade. Definitely not in Blood Gulch anymore. He looked at Red Team, then down at the glowing hilt of his energy sword. The key pulsed warmly against his chest, a constant, alien reminder. Wherever he was, trouble had found him. And somehow, it had brought familiar ghosts with it. Chapter 3, Explanations. The Pelican's flight was a blur of lavender sky and alien cityscapes that gave way to open, rolling hills of unfamiliar, silver-tinged vegetation. Inside the troop bay, the roar of the engines was a comforting, familiar white noise. Tucker sat across from the mother, who had given her name as Alara, and her now sleeping infant, Sophie. The child's tiny fist was wrapped around Alara's finger, a picture of innocent peace that clashed violently with the reason they were fleeing. Alara stared at the Spartans with wide, uncertain eyes, flinching every time Douglas shifted his weight. Tucker just felt a surreal sense of vertigo. Red Team. The legends from the Spirit of Fire. He was sitting with living history, and the history was currently cleaning their rifles and looking just as confused as he was. The Pelican docked with a series of heavy clangs and hisses. The ramp lowered, revealing the cavernous, well-worn hangar bay of a Phoenix-class colony ship. The smell of recycled air, oil, and ozone hit Tucker like a wave of nostalgia for a home he'd never really had. This was a UNSC ship, through and through. They were met by a man with an aura of calm authority, his uniform crisp despite the circumstances. Captain James Cutter. Tucker had only ever seen his picture in declassified briefings. "Welcome aboard the Spirit of Fire," Cutter said, his eyes scanning the new arrivals, the armored stranger, the terrified civilian, the child. His gaze lingered longest on Tucker's unique aquamarine armor. "Sergeant." "Not exactly, sir," Tucker said, his usual bravado tempered by the setting. "Former Private First Class Lavernius Tucker." "Sim Trooper." "Blue Team." Cutter's eyebrow raised slightly. "Simulation Trooper. You handle yourself rather well for a training exercise soldier." "Tell me about it," Tucker sighed, the weariness seeping through. "It's a long story. And I'm not a Spartan." He gestured vaguely to his armor. "This is leftovers from a special project." In Captain Cutter's ready room, over cups of strong, synthetic coffee, the story spilled out. Tucker condensed years of chaos into a ragged summary. Project Freelancer, the director, the AI fragments, the meta. He described the feeling of the AI shards, Delta, Theta, the others, invading his mind, the horrifying loss of control, the things he was forced to do. He didn't spare details about Sarge, about the rampage. He spoke of Chorus, the Civil War, the weight of command he never asked for. Alara listened, holding Sophie tighter, her expression shifting from fear to a dawning, horrified empathy. The UNSC officers around the table, Cutter, Professor Anders, even the stone-faced Red Team Spartans, listened with intense focus. Their skepticism was palpable, but the raw, unvarnished pain in Tucker's voice, the specificity of the technology, AI fragments, energy swords, alien temples, lent his impossible tale a grim credibility. A simulation trooper who became a vessel for rogue AI, fought in an alien civil war, and now wields a piece of ancient alien technology, Cutter summarized, steepling his fingers. It sounds like the plot of a bad sci-fi serial. Yet, here you are. Here I am, Tucker agreed, slumping in his chair. And apparently, so are you guys. How'd you end up, wherever this is? Cutter exchanged a look with Professor Anders. We don't know, she admitted. One moment we were in slipspace near the Ark, the next, a spatial anomaly. We emerged near this planet. Its stellar geography matches no known charts. We are, for all intents and purposes, lost in another universe. And we're not the only displaced ones, Cutter added, pressing a button on the table. A side door hissed open, and two young men walked in. They wore simple, functional clothing, but they moved with the alert grace of soldiers. One had a quiet, intense demeanor, his eyes sharp. The other had a mop of brown hair and a surprisingly easy-going smile that didn't quite reach his watchful eyes. Tucker, these are two individuals we recovered several weeks ago, Cutter introduced. Setsuna F. Sae and Lyle Delandi. They call themselves Gundam Meisters. Setsuna gave a curt nod. We are of celestial being. Pleased to meet you, Lyle, who Tucker instinctively felt went by. Lacan said with a wave. Another castaway, huh? Welcome to the club. Gundams? Tucker asked, the word from the plaza echoing in his mind. Mobile suits, Setsuna clarified. Our units, the Gundams, are currently housed in Hangar Bay 7. They operate on a different technological principle than your machinery. We tried tracking another mech signature a few days ago, Cutter explained, bringing up a blurry sensor log on the holotable. It showed a stylized, humanoid machine with a distinctive finned head and wings, streaking away on conventional thrusters. It bore superficial resemblance to your Gundams, but its energy signature was entirely different. No GN particle emissions. GN particles? Tucker asked. The power source and propellant of our Gundams, Setsuna said. They grant transm capability, quantum brainwave filtering, and a certain presence. It didn't have that, Lacan shrugged. Just big old rockets. Fast, though. Vanished off our scopes heading towards the planet's northern hemisphere. No idea who was piloting it. Tucker leaned back, scratching his helmet. Well, isn't this just a party? Time-traveling Spartans, dimension-hopping Gundam pilots, a city that hates magic babies, and now a mystery mech. He let out a short, humorless laugh. You know, I just wanted to get a taco and figure out my life. This is a lot. Meanwhile, on a desolate, wind-swept island in the planet's northern sea. The high new Gundam stood like a silent, battered sentinel amidst the ruins of a pre-collapse fishing village, its psycho frame faintly glowing in the twilight. Its pilot sat on the cockpit's open hatch, legs dangling over the side. Amuro Ray stared at the unfamiliar constellations. This was Earth, but it wasn't his Earth. The psychic residue of the place was all wrong. A shimmering, oppressive lattice of energy over the continents, pockets of intense fear and hatred, and a deep, pervasive sense of control. He'd felt the brief, brilliant flares of the two unknown mobile suits days ago. Their energy was pure, almost luminous, devoid of the Minovsky particle interference he was used to. It felt hopeful. Then he'd fled. Old habits. See unknown powerful weapons, assume a threat, retreat and observe. Now, alone with the crashing waves, the weight of it all settled on him. Another war. Another endless cycle of conflict fueled by fear of the other. He'd seen the news feeds his onboard computer had managed to crack, the propaganda about Norma, the purges, the worship of the Mana Lattice. It was Xeon's ideology of purity dressed in fantasy clothing, and it made him sick. He looked at his hands, still capable, still young thanks to the ambiguities of his passage here. A second chance. He murmured to the salty air. Or just another battlefield. He thought of the two strange Gundams, of the UNSC ship his sensors had faintly detected in orbit, a robust, pragmatic human design. He thought of the undercurrent of defiance he'd felt, tiny sparks against the monolithic fear of the world. What am I supposed to do now? He asked the empty sky. But for the first time in a long time, it wasn't a question of despair. It was a calculation. He was Amuro Ray, the White Devil, the man who could feel the sadness of the universe. And this new, sad universe was crying out. He closed the cockpit hatch, the psycho frame's glow brightening as it synced with his resolve. Maybe he hadn't joined the others then. But he wouldn't hide forever. The fight, it seemed, had found him again. Chapter 4, Arsenal. The spirit of fire plowed through the alien seas, a steel leviathan in a world of myth. For Alara and baby Sophie, the ship was a sanctuary of impossible kindness. Marines offered polite salutes and shy smiles, engineers rigged up a crib from spare parts, and Professor Anders personally checked on the child's health. The casual, respectful humanity was a stark, beautiful shock after the cold hatred of Arsenal. In his assigned quarters, Tucker couldn't relax. The memory of the plaza, the term, Norma, the sight of that princess's icy disdain, it all churned in his gut. This wasn't just a new world. It was a powder keg. Just my luck, he muttered, polishing the hilt of his energy sword. Find the one universe that makes Chorus look like a fucking tea party. In the main hangar, the two Gundams, Setsuna's amazing Exia and Lacan's Dynames, stood like silent, armored gods amidst the more utilitarian warthogs and pelicans. UNSC mechanics circled them, scanners humming, their voices a mix of awe and technical frustration. No visible exhaust ports for conventional thrust. The armor composition is off the charts. And this, GN particle, residue, its reading is a low-level, benign radiation. A cheerful, bouncing orb of green and orange plastic, Haro, rolled between them. Lacan. Amazing. Lacan. Amazing. From an observation gantry, Setsuna and Lacan watched the ocean scroll by, a silent, mutual understanding passing between them. Displaced warriors in a war not their own. Again. Then, the alarms shattered the calm. Contact. Multiple airborne signatures emerging from spatial anomalies off the port bow. Energy readings are biological and massive. On the bridge, the tactical display lit up with crimson blips. From swirling vortices of iridescent light, creatures of scale, wing, and flame poured forth. Dragons. Not the elegant beasts of legend, but monstrous, predatory things with crystalline hides and eyes burning with malign intelligence. All hands, battle stations. Point defense cannons, engage. Railgun batteries, target the larger hostiles. Captain Cutter's voice was calm steel. The spirit of fire awoke. Streaks of tungsten and superheated plasma filled the sky. A massive elder dragon, its scales glittering like a mountain of jewels, took a Mac round to the chest and disintegrated in a thunderous explosion of viscera and light. But there were too many. Smaller, serpentine dragons weaved through the flak, closing in. Setsuna, Lacan said, already moving for the elevator. I understand. Minutes later, the hangar bay doors opened. The amazing Exia, its single green optic flashing, launched into the maelstrom on a plume of green GN particles. It moved with a dancer's grace, its GN sword slicing through wing joints and necks with impossible ease. On the ship's dorsal hull, the Dynames unfolded, Lacan's voice calm in Tucker's helmet comms. Clearing the field. Watch your heads. Precision rifle reports echoed. Dragons spiraled out of the sky, neat holes drilled through their skulls. Tucker, now in his armor on a secondary gantry, watched the carnage in disbelief. You have got to be kidding me. Dragons. Freaking dragons. Well, it seems my life really does have the shittiest luck. Can't even cross an ocean in peace. Meanwhile, on a distant, fortified island known as Arsenal. In a command center buzzing with activity, a young woman with sleek silver hair and a cybernetic eyepiece, Chloe, stared at her screens. Massive dragon swarm detected, Sector THETA 7. Unprecedented numbers. And, a secondary signature. A large, unidentified vessel. It's engaging. On the flight line, 5 transformable para-males, sleeker, more avian than the blocky Gundams, colored in militant grays and reds, powered up. Their pilots, the elite of the Norma defenders, chattered on a closed channel. Finally, some action. Zola's voice was a hungry grin. Let's hope we can actually score for once, Rosalie sighed, her para-male, Rosa, unfolding its limbs. Enough talk, Hilda barked. Launch. Don't let them near the coast. The para-males shot skyward, transforming in midair from fighter-like vehicles into armed humanoid mecha. They banked towards the battle, only to pull up short in shock. The sky was a holocaust. The unknown ship, a monstrous, angular fortress, was unleashing hell with weapons that spoke of terrifying firepower. And beside it, 2 impossible machines, one a blue and white swordsman moving with ethereal silence, the other a green sniper perched on the ship, killing with machine-like indifference. What the hell? Zola screamed. Who are these bastards stealing our kills? Who cares? Chris snarled, her para-male, Christy, leveling its railgun. No one steals my prey. The para-males dove into the fray, adding their own fire to the storm. Beams and shells tore into the dragon flock. The Gundam Meisters noted the newcomers instantly. Their technology was different, cruder, but their pilots were aggressive and skilled. On the Spirit of Fire bridge, the sensor officer called out, "New contacts. Humanoid mecha units. They're engaging the hostiles as well. Profile doesn't match the earlier Gundam, or anything in the database." "They're not firing on us," Cutter observed, watching the tactical dance. "Align their IFF tags as provisional allies. And keep scanning for that third signature." As if on cue, a new blip screamed in from the upper atmosphere. A streak of blue and white, trailing not GN particles, but the fiery wake of conventional thrusters. It was a Gundam, but of a different lineage altogether, more angular, with distinctive wing-like binders. The high new Gundam entered the battlefield with silent, terrifying efficiency. Its beam rifle flashed, and a scattered deployment of remote fin funnels created a web of annihilation, carving dragons apart with psychically guided precision. "You have got to be fucking kidding me. Another one." Zola's voice was pure outrage over the open Norma channel. "God damn it, they're cleaning the board." Chris yelled in frustration. The dragon swarm, caught between the Spirit of Fire's overwhelming artillery, the precision of the Gundams, and the ferocity of the para-males, was shredded. The sky cleared, leaving only the drifting smoke and the circling mecha. The 5 para-males formed a wary perimeter around the massive ship. On the bridge, a communications request chimed, a harsh, encrypted channel from the Norma forces. Cutter nodded. "Put them through." A visual flickered to life. The scowling, proud face of a young woman with fiery red hair filled the screen. "You, on the giant ship. Who the hell are you people? Are you spies from the Empire of Mitsurugi?" "No, we are not," Cutter replied, his tone firm but neutral. "I am Captain James Cutter of the UNSC Spirit of Fire. We are displaced. We mean you no harm, but we require a secure location to make repairs and assess our situation." A second face, belonging to a sharp-eyed brunette Hilda, popped into a split screen. "Like we'd believe that. You show up with enough firepower to level a city and expect a welcome." A third, a blonde with a defiant smirk, Rosalie, added, "You want a place to stay. Fight us for it." Cutter's expression didn't change, but his voice took on an edge of immense, quiet power. "You've seen a fraction of our defensive capabilities. My ship possesses a magnetic accelerator cannon capable of glassing a continent from orbit. We have no desire to use it. We seek refuge, not conflict. The choice is yours, a potential ally, or a certain catastrophe." There was a long, static-filled silence. Zola's jaw worked. She glanced at her sensor feed. The 3 unknown mecha units, the 2 silent Gundams and the new, funnel-equipped one, had moved to flanking positions, their weapons not aimed, but clearly active. The calculus of the fight had irrevocably changed. "Fine," Zola spat. "Follow us. And one wrong move, and we'll drown you in the sea." The Spirit of Fire, escorted by the wary para-males and trailed by the 3 Gundams, changed course. Soon, the jagged, fortified cliffs of Arsenal rose from the horizon. As the colossal ship descended into a cleared area near the main compound, a crowd gathered, hundreds of young women, all Norma, their faces a mosaic of awe, fear, and desperate hope. From her office overlooking the bay, the commander of Arsenal, a stern woman named Jill, lowered her binoculars, a rare, intrigued smile touching her lips. "Well," she murmured to herself, "you're certainly not from around here." In the hangar, as the high new Gundam settled onto its deck, Setsuna exited the Exia. His eyes locked with Amuro Ray, who was climbing down from his own cockpit. There was a moment of profound recognition, not of the person, but of the type. A pilot who had seen the weight of the world, who carried the ghosts of battles in his eyes. The feeling was not of Ribbons Almark's cold manipulation, but of something heavier, sadder, and infinitely more resolved. Tucker, watching from a shuttle bay door, took in the island fortress, the hardened faces of the female soldiers, and the 3 legendary mecha now standing in a UNSC hangar. He keyed his private comms to a channel only he used. "Hey Church," he said to the empty air, a old, painful habit. "You seeing this shit? I think I just traded one fucked up army for another. And this one has dragons. And giant robots. And, hell, maybe even a talking sword if I'm lucky." He received only silence in return. But for the first time since arriving, the silence didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the deep breath before the storm really began. Chapter 5, Introductions. The spirit of fire loomed over Arsenal's cliffs, a mountain of foreign steel against the sky. For the young Norma pilots who had known only the sleek, predatory lines of their para-males, the ship was a revelation. It was blocky, brutal, and radiated a sense of immense, enduring power. "Oh wow," a pink-haired girl murmured around her lollipop, her eyes wide. "That is something you don't see every day. It's like something from a sci-fi vid, but real." The arrival was a carefully orchestrated display of both diplomacy and quiet strength. A Pelican, its hull scarred from countless deployments, descended with a throaty roar, settling gently on the main plaza. The ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss. First came the Spartans. Douglas, Alice, and Jerome, Red Team, emerged in their crimson Mjolnir armor. They moved with a synchronized, predatory grace that was utterly alien to the watching Norma, their helmeted gazes scanning the surroundings with cold, professional efficiency. The sheer, silent physicality of them drew a collective, nervous hush. Following them was Captain Cutter, his uniform impeccable, his demeanor one of calm authority. And finally, with a less disciplined, more casual swagger, came Tucker in his distinctive aquamarine armor. Jill, the commander of Arsenal, stood waiting, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. The Spartan's disciplined stance, the captain's bearing, Tucker's everything. "I could tell you're not from here," Jill stated, her voice flat. "Yeah, you could say we're actually far from," Tucker began, only to be cut off by a sharp, armored elbow to his sideplate from Alice. Clang. "Shut up," Alice's synthesized voice hissed through her helmet speakers. "Sheesh. Fine, I'll just observe," Tucker grumbled, rubbing his side. Captain Cutter stepped forward, offering a slight, formal nod. "You are correct, Commander. We are far from home. I am Captain James Cutter of the United Nations Space Command, commanding officer of the Spirit of Fire." He gestured to the Crimson Trio. "These are Spartans of Red Team. Douglas 042, Alice 130, and Jerome 092. They are our premier Special Operations Unit." He then gestured dismissively beside him. "And this is Lavernius Tucker. He is affiliated." "What's up?" Tucker said, giving a loose, two-fingered salute. "Spartans," Jill repeated, the word tasting strange. "And what exactly are they?" "They are the result of the UNSC's Spartan 2 program," Cutter explained. "Biologically and cybernetically enhanced super soldiers. They have been instrumental in our survival through multiple conflicts." "It's kind of complicated," Douglas added, his voice a low rumble. Jill's gaze shifted from the Spartans to the distant silhouette of her hangar, where the three giant humanoid machines now rested. "I have to admit, those three unknown units you arrived with, they are not para-males. They are larger, differently armed." "What are they?" "They are called mobile suits," Cutter said. "Specifically, Gundams. They are piloted by individuals from yet another point of origin. Their capabilities, as you witnessed, are considerable." "Gundam," Jill mused, filing the term away. "How very interesting." She looked back at Cutter, her business-like demeanor returning. "You and your crew need somewhere to stay. Fine. You may use the western cliffs and the old dry dock facilities. Do not interfere with our operations." "Your hospitality is appreciated, Commander," Cutter said. "And your ship's performance against the dragons was impressive." Jill allowed a faint, grim smile. "Trust me, Captain. You have no idea how many battles this island has seen." The following hours were a whirlwind of cautious cultural exchange. Norma mechanics and pilots, their curiosity overcoming their wariness, flocked to the designated areas now bustling with UNSC activity. The three Gundams were objects of particular awe. Setsuna's amazing Exia, with its sleek lines and single, glowing eye, stood like a silent knight. Lacan's Dynames, covered in sensors and with its massive sniper rifle, spoke of lethal patience. And Amuro's high new Gundam, with its distinctive fin funnels and psycho frame glow, had an almost psychic presence that made the air hum. Compared to the transformable, almost organic para-males, the Gundams were monuments of a different kind of warfare, heavier, more direct, and brimming with latent power. The UNSC's own ground complement drew equal amazement. Scorpion and Grizzly tanks rolled off transport elevators, their treads crunching on the stone. Warthogs and Mongoose ATVs zipped around, driven by Marines who nodded cautiously at the staring Norma. Hornets and falcons sat on improvised landing pads, their rotors slowly spinning down. And everywhere were the soldiers, Marines in olive drab body armor, the ominous, black-clad ODSTs with their hard eyes, and the ever-present, towering Spartans. The Norma, all young women who had been told they were impurities in a world of mana, watched a military force where men and women served side by side as equals. They sought technology that achieved flight, firepower, and protection not through a mystical lattice, but through raw physics, engineering, and grit. A young mechanic named May, her fingers stained with oil, stared at a Wolverine's missile pod, then at a group of Marines joking easily with a female corporal. She turned to her friend, her voice a whisper of dawning realization. They don't have mana at all. Not a spark. They built all of this. They fight together. The Empire, it would be like children throwing rocks at a mountain. The sentiment spread. The technological marvels from another universe were not just weapons, they were a rebuke to the very foundation of the world that had rejected them. The Empire of Mitsurugi, with its mana-based society and rigid purity laws, suddenly seemed not just cruel, but pathetically backward. In a quiet corner of the plaza, Tucker leaned against a crate of supplies, watching a group of young Norma pilots tentatively approach a parked warthog under the watchful eye of a friendly Marine sergeant. "Well, Church," Tucker muttered under his breath, his habit of talking to ghosts persistent. "Looks like we just dropped a big old can of, what the fuck, into their fishbowl." Again, he glanced up at the Spirit of Fire, a fortress of a lost humanity now sheltering a rejected one. Things are about to get a whole lot weirder. And knowing my luck, a whole lot louder. Chapter 6, An Alliance at Arsenal. A tense, new normal settled over Arsenal. The colossal silhouette of the Spirit of Fire cast a long shadow, both literal and figurative. Marines and ODSTs drilled in unused courtyards, their barked orders and the growl of warthog engines a strange new symphony. The cultural divide was a living thing. Norma mechanics watched, equal parts fascinated and intimidated, as UNSC engineers performed maintenance on Scorpion tanks with brutal efficiency. Lavernius Tucker, now the most recognizable and vocal of the newcomers, found himself a lightning rod for attention. Even in the communal mess hall, out of his armor and trying to enjoy a bland nutrient bar that reminded him sadly of chorus field rations, he couldn't escape it. Clusters of young para-male pilots whispered and pointed, their glances a mix of curiosity, suspicion, and for some, a flicker of something else. "See him. The one in the weird shirt. They say he killed a dragon with just a sword." "A sword? That's impossible without mana enhanced." "That's what I heard. And his armor, it's nothing like a panzer." Across the base, in the shared hangar that now housed 3 legendary machines, a Muro ray worked in focused silence. He ran a hand along the high-news psycho frame, feeling its latent hum. His eyes analytically traced the lines of the nearby para-males, clever, agile, but fragile. Tools of a desperate, outgunned resistance. The feeling was agonizingly familiar. In Commander Jill's office, the air was thick with implication. She sat across from Captain Cutter, a datapad displaying preliminary sensor scans of the mana lattice between them. "Your people," Jill began, her voice measured. "They possess no mana signature. None. It's as if they're holes in the fabric of our world. And yet, you built that." She glanced out the window at the Spirit of Fire. "It defies everything the Empire teaches. Our universe operates on different physical principles," Cutter replied, his hands clasped on the table. "Mana, as you define it, does not exist for us. I gather this makes us, Norma, in the eyes of your oppressors." "Worse," Jill corrected, a grim smile touching her lips. "You are proof that their entire ideology is a lie. That power can come from something other than birthright and a mystical lattice. You are not just impure, you are an existential threat to their dogma." She leaned forward. "And the others? The Gundam pilots? Displaced warriors, like us. Their motivations are their own, but their presence has aligned with ours against common threats. We are separate strands, tangled together by circumstance." "I see." Jill sat back, her cybernetic eye whirring faintly as she processed. "Then our situations are symmetrically desperate. You need a harbor. We need a miracle." Cutter met her gaze squarely. "The UNSC does not abandon allies. And we do not tolerate genocide. The Spirit of Fire and her crew are at your disposal, Commander. Consider us your new shield." The relief in Jill's posture was subtle but profound. That is the first piece of unequivocally good news I've had in a decade. The tension in the mess hall, however, was reaching a flashpoint. Tucker was contemplating his sorry-looking nutrient bar when a tray slammed onto the table beside him, sending a spray of grayish gruel across his fatigues. He slowly looked up. Standing over him were two Norma pilots he recognized from the Dragon battle, the fiery-haired Hilda and her sharp-tongued wingmate, Rosalie. Well, Rosalie sneered, looking him up and down. If it isn't the walking tin can. Or should I say, the sitting tin can. You people eat this slop. Figures. Hilda crossed her arms, a smirk playing on her lips. Heard you needed your big metal friends to save you from a little confrontation earlier. Not so tough without your shell, are you? Tucker carefully set his bar down. For the record, the name's Tucker. And I was trying to be diplomatic. You know, the thing you do when you're not a raging asshole. Ooh, he talks back. Hilda mocked. Maybe you do have some fight in you. Or are you just all talk, Norma lover? That did it. Tucker stood, his chair scraping back. Okay, you know what? I've had it with this racist crap. You got a problem with me. Let's step outside and you can. Three immense figures in forest green Mjolnir armor materialized as if from the shadows, forming an impassable wall between Tucker and the pilots. Jerome 092 stood directly in the center, his helmeted gaze fixed on the two women. That's enough. Jerome's voice was a flat, digital monotone that carried absolute authority. Disengage. Now. Douglas 042 shifted his weight slightly, the movement making the deck plates creak. We are guests here. You will not provoke hostilities. Alice 130 simply stared, her silence more intimidating than any shout. Hilda and Rosalie paled, their bravado evaporating under the Spartans' silent, immense pressure. They scoffed, shooting a final venomous glance at Tucker before turning on their heels and marching away. Jerome turned his head slightly toward Tucker. The message was clear: stand down. This isn't the fight. Tucker slumped back into his seat, frustration boiling under his skin. Freaking fantastic. Saved by the superheroes. Again. As he glared at his ruined meal, a new voice cut through his simmering anger. It was blunt, devoid of malice or flirtation, just simple observation. I don't mind it. He looked up. It was the pink-haired pilot, Ange, the one with the ever-present lollipop. She was studying him with the detached curiosity of someone examining a strange insect. Your color, she stated, tilting her head. The dark brown of your skin. It's different. Not bad. It looks strong. Like worn leather armor. She popped the lollipop out of her mouth. Even though you are a man, and a little bit loud. Tucker blinked, his anger derailed by sheer, bewildered honesty. A short, surprised laugh escaped him. Thanks. I think. That's the weirdest compliment I've ever gotten, and I've been called a sexy policewoman by a talking alien. Far from the strained piece of arsenal, in a fold of corrupted spacetime that stank of ozone and spilled coolant, a very different council was convening. The man known as Embryo stood serenely at the center of a vast, organic-looking chamber that pulsed with a sickly light. Before him was a tableau of nightmares. To his right, a holographic projection shimmered, displaying the snarling visage of Atriox, the Jiralhanae warlord of the Banished. The image was grainy, transmitted from across a gulf of stars, but the intelligence and ruthless ambition in the brute's eyes were unmistakable. Beside the projection stood a towering, scarred Spartan in gunmetal gray armor, his stance that of a mercenary. Felix. The coordinates were accurate. Felix's voice crackled over the comm, smug. The Forerunner cache is yours. As promised. The Banished do not forget a debt. Atriox's growl resonated through the chamber. Nor do we take orders from pretty humans in shiny rooms. This is a transaction. Nothing more. Of course, Warlord, Embryo purred, unfazed. Think of me as a facilitator. I provide opportunities. The destruction of those who would stand against our collective enlightenment. To Embryo's left stood another figure, clad in a crisp Neo-Zeon uniform, his face obscured by a mask that echoed a forgotten legend. Full frontal, the second coming of Char, was a statue of cold calculation. And floating silently behind him, not as a hologram but physically present in the dark hangar beyond the viewport, was the sinister, transforming silhouette of the Reborn's Gundam, piloted by the celestial innovator, Ribbons Almark. The sides, You speak of a childish concept, Full Frontal stated, his voice devoid of emotion. There is only the gravity of destiny, and those with the will to shape its flow. Your mana presents a unique vector for societal collapse. That is of interest. Ribbon's voice echoed directly in their minds, a serene, invasive whisper. The evolution of humanity cannot be left to chance, or to the clumsy hands of old powers. A controlled pruning is necessary. Your world, Embryo, will be an excellent test case. Embryo smiled, a genuine expression of delight. Then we are in accord. A subtle alliance. The banished shall have their war and their plunder. The sleeves shall have their chaos and their proving ground. And I shall have my perfected world, cleansed of impurity and resistance. In that blasphemous corner of the multiverse, the lines were drawn not between nations, but between philosophies of ruin. The war for this world was no longer a local conflict. It had just been upgraded, and the patrons of the coming storm were entities of cosmic malice. The first thunderclap of their alliance had already echoed across dimensions, and its target was the fragile sanctuary of Arsenal. Chapter 7. Familiar Faces at Azrael. The artificial gravity of the Spirit of Fire's training bay was the only thing keeping Tucker in his seat. Around him, holographic displays flickered, projecting the dizzying pov of a mobile suit cockpit. Not just any mobile suit, the sleek, white and purple form of a Zeta Gundam 3A type, its powerful hyper-mega launcher a tangible weight in the simulation's feedback systems. Okay, you overgrown lizard, think you're fast. Tucker muttered, his hands a blur on the controls. The simulated dragon dove, maw glowing with incandescent fire. He yanked the stick, the Zeta transforming mid-dodge into its Waverider form, the maneuver violently G-force heavy even in simulation. He came about, the targeting reticle blinking red. Got a present for ya. The mega launcher thrummed, a lance of particle energy vaporizing the target. Simulation complete. Target elimination. 100%. Mission success. The cockpit hatch hissed open. Tucker pulled off his sim helmet, a cocky grin spreading across his face as he saw the lone observer on the gantry above, Amuro Ray. See that? 100%. Tucker called up, wiping sweat from his brow. How's that for a newbie, huh? Eat your heart out, Char. Amuro descended the stairs, his expression unreadable. He stopped before Tucker, giving a small, approving nod. You did good. Your reflexes are exceptional. The instinct to transform for evasion, then re-engage, it's not taught. It's felt. Tucker's grin widened. Hell yeah, it is. I keep telling people, I'm a natural at this giant robot crap. But try not to act all arrogant. Amuro's voice was quiet, but it cut through Tucker's celebration like a beam saber. The older pilot's eyes held a weight of memory, of lost comrades, of battles won by skill and lost by hubris. That arrogance, Amuro continued, his gaze steady, will always get you killed in battle. Or get someone else killed. A mobile suit is power. Respect it, or it will consume you. The grin melted off Tucker's face, replaced by a flush of heat that had nothing to do with the sim. He felt suddenly, stupidly young. The ghost of Sarge, of all the times his mouth had written checks his ass had to cash, flashed in his mind. Yeah, right, sorry. Amuro gave another nod, this one of acceptance rather than praise, and walked away, leaving Tucker standing in the sudden, hollow silence of his victory. Later, trying to shake the encounter, Tucker moved through the ship's corridors. The Spirit of Fire was now a buzzing nexus of allied forces. He passed Setsuna, who was silently polishing a component of the Exia's GN sword with monastic focus. Lacan offered a casual two-fingered salute from where he was tweaking the Dynamese's rifle scope. Locus, a silent specter near his customized GM sniper, didn't acknowledge him at all. Cool guys. Not exactly the, let's grab a beer and bitch about command, types. The cafeteria offered a different kind of tension. Tucker slid into a seat, helmet off, and kept his head down, focusing intently on his tray of protein mash. He could feel the glares from a nearby table where Hilda, Rosalie, and another pilot were seated. He wasn't in the mood for another round of racist space jackass. He was almost finished when the alarms tore through the ship. Alert. Unidentified hostile contacts, designated, dragons, engaging fleet perimeter. All combat personnel to battle stations. Mobile suit and para-male pilots, launch immediately. Chaos erupted. Tucker was moving before the echo died, sprinting for the hangar. He vaulted into the cockpit of his assigned Zeta-3A, the systems booting with a familiar hum. Lavernius Tucker, Zeta-3A type, launching. The mobile suit shot from the bay, transforming instantly into Waverider mode, the hyper-mega launcher locking under its fuselage. He burst into a sky already full of fire and scale. To his left, the high new Gundam unfolded like a blue angel, its fin funnels detaching and spiraling out, creating a web of devastating beam fire. To his right, the amazing Exia darted on trails of green light, a blur of precise, lethal motion. From the flanks, the synchronized crack of high-caliber rounds marked the positions of Lacan's Dynames and Locus's GM sniper, each shot a guaranteed kill. Below, the ocean churned as the Norma's para-males, Vilkis, Rosa, Christie, wove through the lower altitudes, their agility making up for their lighter armament. And holding the center, a sight that made Tucker's simulated training seem like a joke. A pair of Ra Kalem-class battleships, their main batteries unleashing volleys that tore entire wings of dragons from the sky. At the lead ship's comms, a voice as steady as bedrock cut through the noise. All units, this is Captain Bright Noah of the Ra Kalem. Maintain formation. Focus fire on the larger hostiles. Don't let them scatter us. Tucker gaped. Bright Noah. As in the, Captain Bright, this is Lieutenant Amuro Ray. Do you copy? Amuro's voice was calm over the fleet-wide channel. There was a beat of static, then a reply filled with a profound, weary relief. Amuro, I read you. It's good to see you again. And I've never seen those other mobile suits before. Care to explain what's going on? It's a long story. There's a safe place for you after this is over. The battle was a brutal, one-sided demonstration of combined arms. The dragons, a terrifying threat to Arsenal alone, were annihilated against the assembled firepower of 3 displaced militaries. As the last enemy fell, an eerie quiet descended, broken only by the hum of engines and the hiss of cooling metal. On the bridges of the Ra Kalems and from the cockpits of Jettas and REGZs, the Londo Bell pilots stared in shock at their saviors, the monstrous, ancient spirit of fire, the angelic and bestial Gundams, and the feral-looking para-males. What in the world is all this? A Jigan pilot breathed over an open channel. Another voice, from a Jetta, chimed in. Whoever was piloting that other Zeta type, he's a real natural. Scary good for a rookie. The subsequent meeting in Captain Cutter's briefing room was a tableau of displaced history. Captain James Cutter, UNSC, stood across from Captain Bright Noah, Earth Federation. They represented branches of humanity that had never known each other, yet shared the same weary resolve in their eyes. Around them, engineers and soldiers mingled in cautious awe. Federation techs marveled at the GN drives of celestial being, their principles defying Minovsky physics. UNSC personnel studied the transformable frame of the REGZ with professional interest. Norma mechanics, brave enough to venture in, stared wide-eyed at everything. Tucker lingered at the back, watching the legendary Bright Noah. He thought of Amuro's warning, of the weight these people carried. He wasn't just a sim trooper in a stolen Gundam anymore. He was a link in a chain that now stretched across broken universes, and the next pull could drag them all into the abyss. The arrogance was gone, burned away by particle beam and dragon fire, replaced by a cold, focused understanding. The war had just gotten a lot bigger, and his place in it, terrifyingly real. Chapter 8. Saving Princess Ange. The operation was a blade in the dark. While the Spirit of Fire and her allied fleets drew attention in the skies, a scalpel was inserted into the heart of the Empire. UNSC operatives, their armor swapped for rough-spun cloaks and their faces obscured by hoods, moved through the capital's underbelly. ODSTs with suppressed SMGs, and Spartans in light infiltration suits, were ghosts in the Gilded City. Their mission: extreme high-value asset extraction. In the sun-drenched Royal Plaza, a celebration was curdling into a nightmare. Princess Angelisa Karuga Misurugi stood radiant before her subjects, a symbol of mana-blessed purity. Then her brother, Crown Prince Julio, took the stage. His smile was a knife. "My beloved sister," he began, his voice amplified by magic, dripping with false sorrow. "There is a sickness in our house. A deception that stains our royal blood." He turned to her, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Ange, is a Norma." The word fell like a bomb. The crowd's adoration twisted into a rictus of horror and rage. "Norma. Traitor. Abomination. From a shadowed archway, a UNSC operative keyed his comms, voice flat. Package is compromised. The asset is public. Asset status. Hostile extraction required. Initiating contingency. As Ange stood frozen, the world she knew shattering around her, Julio pressed his advantage. He turned to their father, King Sophia, his voice a whip crack of accusation. And you, father, you hid this filth. You betrayed the empire and the light of Mana itself. For that, the penalty is death. He gestured to the captain of the royal guard. The man stepped forward, sword drawn. The shot wasn't loud, a sharp crack from a UNSC sniper's rifle hidden in a bell tower. The guard captain dropped, a neat hole in his helmet. Chaos, already simmering, boiled over. But the second surprise came from within the royal retinue itself. A guard, at the king's side moved. It was no knight. It was an ODST in expertly forged fake armor. He drove a powered gauntlet into Prince Giulio's face with a sickening crunch, sending the prince tumbling from the dais in a spray of blood and broken teeth. In the same motion, he drew a sleek M6H sidearm and put 2 rounds into the chests of the nearest real guards. He grabbed the stunned king by his ornate robes. "Trust me, your highness. You'll be safe with us," the ODST grunted, his voice synthesized and grim. They burst from the palace into the main square, now a roiling panicked mass. More shots rang out from elevated positions, UNSC marksmen picking off imperial officers and mages with chilling precision. From market stalls and alley mouths, disguised marines and ODSTs shed their cloaks, their rifles barking controlled bursts, cutting down the advancing imperial forces with a violence more mechanical and efficient than any magical combat the citizens had ever seen. Through this maelstrom of gunfire and screaming, a streak of aquamarine charged. Tucker, having infiltrated with a separate team, moved with a speed that seemed impossible without mana. His energy sword flared to life with its distinctive shink voom, a blade of pure cyan plasma. He intercepted the new captain of the guard, a man summoning a crackling lance of mana. Tucker didn't duel, he executed. A single, brutal upward slash severed the lance and the man behind it in a flash of vaporized metal and flesh. He skidded to a halt before the disoriented princess and the ODST guarded king. Sorry to drop in uninvited, his helmet speaker chirped with forced casualness. Here to save you, your highness. Kinda our thing today. The surviving citizens stared, their hatred momentarily drowned in pure confusion. A man. But, he has no mana aura. Is he a Norma too? The roar of thrusters answered. A pelican, painted in UNSC olive drab, screamed over the rooftops, its rear ramp yawning open. It hovered, wash kicking up dust and debris. I think you both should come with me if you want to live, Tucker said, not asking. He and the ODST half-guided, half-shoved the royal pair up the ramp as covering fire kept the square suppressed. The ramp closed, and the pelican peeled away, leaving the smoldering chaos of the capital behind. In the shuddering troop bay, Ange stared at the soldier in the strange aquamarine armor who had just cut down her world's greatest knight like he was nothing. The adrenaline faded, leaving a hollow, trembling cold. Her father was pale but composed, a king even in flight. Why? Ange finally whispered, the word tearing from her throat. You don't have any mana. You're not of this world. You defended me, Enorma. You defended my father. Why? Tucker reached up and retracted his helmet. The face that appeared was human, tired, marked with a history she couldn't read. He offered a small, lopsided smile that didn't reach his eyes. Seemed like the right thing to do, he said simply. Then the familiar, infuriating smirk touched his lips. Besides, if you're gonna say something racist, I might just have to throw you out of this bird. So let's keep it civil, yeah. King Sophia bowed his head deeply, a profound gesture from a monarch to a common soldier. Thank you. We are in your debt. Tucker actually looked uncomfortable. Please, your highness, there's no need. I'm just a sim trooper. A grunt. Compared to those knights of yours. He shrugged, the ghost of Amuro's warning in his mind. He didn't boast. He stated a fact. Let's just say they were weak. Their arrival at Arsenal was another seismic shock. For the Londo Belt cruise, the sight of an island fortress manned entirely by young women was a bizarre and disorienting twist in an already impossible situation. For Ange, it was the final, brutal anchor to her new reality. She watched as her father was escorted away to speak with the severe-looking Captain Cutter and the steady Captain Bright. She was left standing on the flight line, surrounded by the hum of technology she didn't understand and the hard, evaluating stares of the Norma pilots, girls just like her, but forged in hardship she had never known. She saw Tucker stride across the tarmac, not towards her, but towards a gargantuan machine of white and purple, the Zeta Gundam. He climbed into its chest without a backward glance, a man becoming part of a weapon. The truth, cold and absolute, settled in her heart. Princess Angelisa Karuga Mitsurugi was dead, executed in that plaza by her brother's words. What remained was Ange, a Norma, feared, hated, discarded. And for the first time, staring at the determined faces of the outcasts around her and the formidable strangers who had torn her from her gilded cage, she understood the weight of the prejudice she had been spared from her whole life. There was no gilded path back. There was only the hard, unforgiving road forward, and she was now walking it, utterly alone, and yet surrounded by the most powerful allies, and enemies, this broken world had ever seen. Chapter 9, Preparations. The cavernous hangars of Arsenal and the spirit of fire echoed with a new symphony, the grind of metal, the hum of alien reactors, and the barked orders of engineers from a dozen different realities. The Alliance was moving from a desperate refuge to a fortified bastion. Preparation was the new watchword. Within the primary hangar bay, two legends stood ready. A Muro Ray's high new Gundam, now retrofitted with the heavy weapon system, loomed with a new, intimidating promise of firepower, a walking artillery platform. Nearby, Setsuna F. Sae's OO Gundam had undergone its final metamorphosis. Cradled in its support frame, shimmering with a subtle green aura, was the OO Kant T, its form perfected and its twin drive system humming with stabilized GN particles, ready to bend the fabric of spacetime itself. Tucker, having just climbed out of his own unit, gave a low whistle as he looked at the two upgraded giants. His Zeta Gundam 3A type felt capable, but these were on another level. Damn, enough firepower there to obliterate anything dumb enough to get in our way. His thoughts were interrupted by a quiet presence. Sitting on a crate nearby, still in her fine but now travel-worn dress, was Ange. The former Princess Angelise of Mitsurugi watched the bustle with silent, haunted eyes. The reality of her situation, exiled, branded a Norma, saved by strangers with no mana, had fully settled in. He hesitated, then walked over, the clank of his boots loud on the deck. "Hey, princess." She didn't look at him. "Don't call me that." "Right, Ange." He leaned against a support strut, following her gaze to the OO Kant T. "Pretty, huh? In a can dismantle a battleship kind of way." "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice flat. "All of you. You fight with machines and guns, not mana. You have no stake in this world's war." Tucker's usual smirk was absent. He thought of Sarge's grave, of Griff leaving, of Simmons tinkering alone in a silent canyon. Let's just say we're familiar with being on the wrong side of a shitty deal. And sometimes, the only thing you can do is pick a side and start shooting back. Even if it's someone else's fight. She finally turned her head, studying his face. "You sound like you've lost a lot." "Yeah, we have." He pushed off the strut. "But we're still here. And so are you. That pisses somebody off, and that's a good start." In Captain Cutter's briefing room, now serving as the Allied Command Center, a historic meeting was underway. King Sophia, having recovered from the shock of his rescue, sat across from Captain Cutter and Captain Bright Noah. "I must admit," Sophia began, his voice heavy with gratitude and awe, "I am surprised. Your people, you survive, you thrive, you build such marvels without mana. It contradicts everything my world believes." Captain Cutter offered a grim, knowing nod. "Trust us, Your Majesty. We've fought wars that nearly caused the extinction of our species. We learned to rely on ingenuity, courage, and each other. Mana or no mana, that's what matters." Bright Noah folded his arms, his expression that of a veteran who had seen similar wonders and horrors. "Our path was among the stars, in metal suits and battleships. We never expected a world where power was drawn from within. But a soldier's duty is the same, protect the innocent." A small, weary smile touched King Sophia's lips. For the first time since the coup, he felt a flicker of genuine hope. "Then, with your strength in my daughter's rightful cause, perhaps there is a way forward." The preparations intensified. On the cliffs of Arsenal, UNSC Condor dropships and Hornets screamed through training exercises, their weapons painting targets on the horizon. In the war rooms, tactical data from Londo Bell's Jeddah and Jigan units was cross-referenced with para-mail combat logs and the Spirit of Fire's sensor ghosts, building a comprehensive picture of the enemy. But the most critical preparation was happening in a sealed chamber deep within the Spirit of Fire. Professor Ellen Anders stood before a holotank, her expression one of intense fascination and concern. Flanking her were Captain Cutter and Commander Jill. The display showed a topographical map of the region, but overlaid upon it was a shimmering, intricate web of energy, the Monolattice. At its heart, pulsing like a diseased star, was the Imperial capital. Our long-range scans are conclusive, Anders said, zooming in on the capital. The lattice isn't just a natural phenomenon. It's being actively manipulated and weaponized from a central source within the palace. The energy signatures are aggressive, corrosive. Jill's cybernetic I-word. That would explain the increased dragon activity and the stability of Julio's coup. He's not just using mana, he's twisting it. There's more, Anders continued, her voice dropping. We're detecting faint, non-mana energy signatures entangled with the lattice at the corruption epicenter. Transdimensional resonance patterns. They match residual signatures from our own arrival events. Cutter's face hardened. You're saying someone else came here before us. And they're working with Julio. Or controlling him, Jill stated grimly. Before they could delve deeper, the door hissed open. A Marine sergeant stood at attention, his face pale. Sirs, ma'am, you need to see the live feed from Observation Post Gamma. Now. They turned to the main view screen. The feed showed the horizon from a cliffside watchtower. The sky was clear lavender. Then, without warning, it rippled. A vast, silent tear of iridescent light split the heavens. It wasn't a dragon portal. It was different, geometric, artificial. And from it descended not beasts, but a fleet. Sleek, predatory purple hulls that screamed Covenant design philosophy, but cruder, more brutal. Banished assault carriers and seraphs. But among them flew other shapes, the angular, zeonic silhouettes of Gira Zulus and Zakus, their mono eyes glowing with malevolent red light. At their lead was a single, crimson mobile suit of terrifying elegance, a Sinanju. And in the center of the formation, hovering on silent, impossible technology, was a vessel that made Cutter's blood run cold. A CAS-class assault carrier, but its hull was marred with the jagged, burning emblem of the Banished. On the bridge of that carrier, in a throne of scrap metal and Forerunner alloy, Warlord Atriox watched the target world grow larger. Beside him, a hologram of the masked full frontal flickered. The coordinates provided by your human ally were precise. The mana lattice is a potent energy source, ripe for harvesting. Atriox's growl filled the command deck. Then let us begin the harvest. Signal the fleet. All forces, attack pattern, sunder. Crush their defiance. Burn their hope. Leave nothing but ashes for our partners to sift through. The storm they had prepared for had arrived. But it was not the storm they had expected. The war for this world was no longer a rebellion. It was an invasion, and the vanguard of the symbiotic alliance of ruin had just breached the sky. Chapter 10. Awakening. Far from the Allied preparations, in a secret pocket dimension that stank of ozone and ambition, a far more sinister pact was being solidified. Embryo stood calmly at the center of his sanctum, a gracious host to a gallery of horrors. A holographic image of the banished warlord Atriox glowered, his massive gravity mace resting on his shoulder. The traitor Spartan Felix stood beside the projection, a silent broker of violence. To Embryo's other side stood the immaculate figure of Full Frontal, the second coming of Char, his presence as cold as space itself. Hovering slightly behind him, both physically and metaphysically, was the serene Ribbons Almark, his reborn's Gundam, a silent promise of transcendent power. So, Full Frontal stated, his voice devoid of emotion. It seems we are all here. An alliance of convenience. A subtle alliance, rumbled Atriox's hologram. The banished take what we are owed. We do not serve your philosophies. Ribbon's voice slithered into their minds, smooth and invasive. Philosophies are irrelevant. This world's unique properties present an optimal test bed for controlled societal pruning. A necessary step in evolution. Embryo smiled, his eyes gleaming with megalomaniacal delight. Precisely. Consider this a clarity of purpose. You, Warlord, shall have your war and plunder. You, Frontal, shall have your chaos to prove Spacenoid destiny. And you, Ribbons, shall have your laboratory. In return, you will dismantle the little resistance coalescing around my wayward Norma and these, dimensional interlopers." He waved a hand, displaying sensor glimpses of the Spirit of Fire, the Gundams, and the fortified arsenal. "Destroy them. Clear the board. And I will create the perfect, orderly world from the ashes, a world where each of your desires can find a place." The coalition of ruin nodded in silent, predatory agreement. The stage was set for annihilation. Back at Arsenal, the focus was on forging strength from within. In a training yard, Ange launched herself at Spartan Douglas 042 with a furious cry. She was all raw, untamed anger, the fury of a betrayed princess. Douglas, a mountain of green armor, didn't flinch. He caught her wrist, used her momentum against her, and planted her firmly on the mat with a controlled suplex that drove the air from her lungs. Again, she coughed, scrambling up, eyes burning. Douglas's helmet emitted a static chuckle. "Damn, you're one stubborn kid." His voice turned serious, the teacher emerging from the soldier. "But stubborn isn't enough. You're not a princess here. Your brother, your kingdom, they turned their backs. You're Norma. You fight with what you've got, and you keep up." The lesson hit harder than the throw. Ange nodded, the fury hardening into resolve. Nearby, in a high-fidelity combat simulator, Tucker was reaching his limit. Piloting the Zeta-3A in a virtual dogfight against Amuro's high new Gundam was like trying to outrace a ghost. Beams and funnels came from everywhere. But in a moment of pure, desperate instinct, Tucker felt the attack before the simulator's sensors registered it. A prickling on the back of his neck, a flash of impossible trajectory in his mind's eye. He jerked the controls, his mobile suit twisting in an impossible evasion that slipped between a hail of beam fire. The simulation ended. Tucker slumped in the cockpit, drenched in sweat. He hadn't won, but he'd survived longer than any protocol should have allowed. Amuro's calm voice came over the comm. "Good. Your reflexes are adapting. You're beginning to feel the flow of combat. Not just see it." Unbeknownst to Tucker, in the observation room, Amuro watched the data stream with intense interest. The reaction times, the predictive movements, they were nascent, unrefined, but undeniably present. New type potential. The chaotic energy of the freelancer, the trauma of the meta, the adaptability of a survivor, it was stirring something within the aquamarine soldier. Later, as Tucker sat alone in the mess hall, mechanically eating, he felt a strange clarity. The noises of the base, the engineers, the distant thrusters, the murmur of Norma pilots, seemed sharper. He felt a pang of emotion that wasn't his own, a mix of determination and loneliness. He looked up and saw Ange walking away from the Spartan training grounds, her small frame squared with newfound will. He didn't understand it, but for a fleeting second, he felt her struggle as if it were his own. The ghost of church in his head was silent, but the universe, it seemed, was getting louder. The final test came not in simulation, but in reality. A scouting patrol stumbled upon a massive, elder dragon, one capable of manipulating localized gravity fields. It wasn't just attacking, it was warping the battlefield, tearing at the very fabric of the Allied fleet's formation. The battle was chaos, ships and mobile suits straining against invisible, crushing forces. "All units, focus long-range fire. Break its concentration," Bright Noah commanded from the Ra Kalem. It was a combined symphony of destruction. Lacan's Dynames and Locus's GM sniper found chinks in its scaled armor. The Spirit of Fire's Mac gun roared, a tungsten spear punching through a distorted gravity well. Setsuna in the 00 Con T shot forward, a green comet, his GN sword V cleaving through the spatial distortions themselves. And Tucker, riding the edge of that strange new awareness, weaved his Zeta through the destabilized fields, his movements almost prescient, delivering pinpoint strikes with his hyper-mega launcher where they would hurt most. The dragon fell, its gravitational hold collapsing in a silent, shimmering wave. "Damn," Tucker breathed over the open channel, his Zeta hovering amidst the dissipating energy. "That big one was something else. Good work, everyone," Captain Cutter's voice crackled. "All forces, return to base for repairs and R&R. Well earned." As the Allied forces turned homeward, a wave of fatigue and that eerie, expanded sensitivity washed over Tucker. He glanced at his scanner, then out at the stars. The battle was won, but Amuro's warning echoed in his mind, now married to his own uncanny new senses. This wasn't just a fight anymore. It was an awakening. And he was right. The worst was coming. As the last Pelican docked with the Spirit of Fire, deep within the ship's sensor analysis hub, a priority alert flashed. Professor Anders stared at the screen, her blood running cold. Captain Cutter, Commander Jill, to the sensor room immediately. When they arrived, the display showed a region of space not far from the planet. It was calm. Then, the fabric of reality itself rippled. A vast, silent tear of iridescent light, geometric and chillingly artificial, split the heavens. It was nothing like a dragon portal. From it descended a fleet. Sleek, predatory purple hulls that screamed Covenant design philosophy, but cruder, more brutal, banished assault carriers and swarms of seraphs. But among them flew other, older shapes, the angular, zeonic silhouettes of Gira Zulus and Zakui eyes, their mono eyes glowing with malevolent red light. At their lead was a single, crimson mobile suit of terrifying elegance and menace, the Sinanju. And in the center of the formation, hovering on silent, impossible technology, was a vessel that made Cutter's blood run cold. A CAS-class assault carrier, its hull marred with the jagged, burning emblem of the Banished. On the bridge of that carrier, in a throne of scrap metal and Forerunner alloy, Warlord Atriox watched the target world grow larger. Beside him, a hologram of the masked full frontal flickered. The coordinates provided by your human ally were precise, Frontal's voice stated. The Mana Lattice is a potent, if crude, energy source. Ripe for harvesting. Atriox's growl filled the command deck, a sound of pure, anticipatory violence. Then let us begin the harvest. Signal the fleet. All forces, attack pattern, sunder. Crush their defiance. Burn their hope. He leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the tactical map now highlighting Arsenal and the Spirit of Fire. Leave nothing but ashes for our partners to sift through. The storm they had prepared for had arrived. But it was not the storm they had expected. The war for this world was no longer a rebellion against a bigoted empire. It was an extinction-level invasion, and the vanguard of the symbiotic alliance of ruin had just breached the sky. The time for preparation was over. The final battle for existence had begun. Chapter 11, The Onslaught begins. The victory over the gravity-warping Elder Dragon had been a spark of hope, but sparks die quickly when drowned in darkness. Arsenal's watchtower alarms didn't just blare. They screamed, a new, apocalyptic cadence that drove every soul on the island to battle stations before the first words of command could even be spoken. The sky, which moments before had been clearing of dragon fire and particle beam residue, was now being torn apart by something artificial and infinitely more malevolent. The spatial rift wasn't a natural vortex. It was a surgical, geometric tear, glowing with the sickly purple of corrupted slipspace and the cold blue of Minovsky particle disruption. Clean edges. Deliberate angles. This wasn't chaos breaking through, this was an invasion planned. Through that wound in reality poured the vanguard of the symbiotic alliance of ruin. First came the swarm. Banished banshees and seraphs screamed through the opening, their engines howling with a predatory glee that transcended any mere machine. There was something alive in their flight patterns, something that made even veteran pilots' stomachs clench. They spread like locusts across the sky, plasma cannons already spitting fire at anything that moved. Behind them came the heavier shapes, phantoms and liches, their troop bays already open, disgorging drop pods that slammed into the ocean and the rocky shores with geyser explosions. Each pod cracked open to reveal hulking Jiralhanai chieftains in war paint and power armor, packs of skittering Kig-Yar skirmishers with point defense gauntlets raised, and disciplined lines of grunts that moved with none of their usual cowardice. These were fanatics, their breathing masks cycling with zealous rhythm. But the true shock came next. Alongside the alien dropships flew angular, unmistakable humanoid forms. Gira Zulus in menacing dark green, their mono eyes sweeping left and right with cold mechanical precision. Squads of Zaku 2F2 types in rust red and midnight blue armor, a blasphemous sight against the fantasy sky, these icons of the one-year war reborn in a world that had never known Side 3 or Xeon. Doms in desert colors, their jet streams leaving purple trails as they swept low over the water. They moved with disciplined, zealous aggression. Beam rifles crackled. Missile pods showered death across the coastal batteries. And unlike the Banished, who fought with savage joy, these mobile suits fought with the cold precision of crusaders executing a holy judgment. At the forefront, a crimson spearhead. The Sinanju descended like a bloody comet, its verniers flaring brilliant gold as it came to a hover before the Allied defenses. It didn't fire. It simply observed, its single glowing eye sweeping across the assembled forces of Arsenal and the spirit of fire with what could only be described as contemptuous patience. A silent, arrogant herald of the force behind it. That force hung in the sky like a floating mountain of wrath. The CAS-class assault carrier Kraken's maw was a scarred veteran of 100 battles, its hull marked by plasma burns, Mach impact craters, and the jagged wounds of boarding actions. But the Banished symbols painted across its surface had been joined by new markings, strange circuit patterns that pulsed with sickly purple light. Its energy projectors were already charging, a baleful glow building beneath its armored prow. On the bridge of the Spirit of Fire, the tactical display lit up with a nightmare. Captain James Cutter's face was granite as he absorbed the scope of what they faced. 20 years of war had taught him to read battlefields, and every instinct screamed that this was no mere raid. This was an extermination force. All hands, battle stations. His voice cut through the alarm klaxons like a blade. This is not a drill. We have a combined Banished and unknown hostile mechanized infantry assault. All defensive batteries, open fire. Pelican gunships, scramble. Spartan teams, to the forward trenches. First want every Marine who can hold a rifle on that beachhead yesterday. On the lower deck, Sergeant John Forge was already running, his shotgun slapping against his thigh armor. You heard the captain. Move, move, move. Those are Jirulhanai out there, and they didn't come for a negotiation. Across the narrow strait, on Arsenal's command deck, Jill watched through her cybernetic eye as it whirred and clicked, processing the scale of incoming hostiles. For a moment, just a moment, the weight of it threatened to crush her. Then the soldier in her took over. So, the true enemy reveals itself. She turned to the communications officer. All para-mail units, launch immediately. Priority 1. Protect the coastal batteries. Do not let them establish a beachhead. Dorn, get the second wave ready. We're going to need everyone. Chaos erupted across every frequency. This is Ra Kalem. Engaging hostile capital ship. Jettas, Jigans, intercept those mobile suits. Don't let them get close to the civilian evacuation shelters. Dynames, engaging. Priority targets are their command and control elements. Marking high-value enemy units now. Spartan Red Team, moving to reinforce the western cliff line. They're trying to flank the missile silos. Jerome out. Maganak Corps, forming defensive perimeter around the maintenance bays. We've got wounded here. Exia, no, wait, I've got 3 Zakus on my tail. Someone, a scream, then static. Tucker was already sprinting to his Zeta, his heart hammering against his ribs but his mind strangely clear. The eerie calm from after the dragon fight was gone, replaced by razor-sharp focus. As the cockpit sealed around him and the world outside muffled to a distant thunder, he felt it again, that pressure at the edge of his mind, like a storm of hostile intent pressing against a window. But now he understood what it was. Not madness. Not imagination. It was them, the enemy pilots. Their killing intent, their cold purpose, bleeding through whatever connection this world had given him. Focus, Tucker. Focus or die. Lavernius Tucker, Zeta 3A, launching. The catapult hurled him into a world gone mad. Beam fire crisscrossed with plasma bolts and ballistic tracers, painting the sky in deadly colors. A Jigan exploded to his left, torn apart by concentrated fire from a squad of Zakus. He caught a glimpse of the pilot's ejection seat rocketing clear before a Banshee's plasma cannon reduced it to vapor. A para-mail Hilda's distinctive purple unit, he thought, spiraled past, smoking and trailing debris, pursued by a shrieking Banshee that snapped at its heels like a wolf. They're everywhere. A young Norma pilot's voice screamed over the comm, laced with terror she couldn't quite suppress. They're everywhere, I can't. Stay in formation, squad. Zola's voice barked back, her Vilkis spinning through a cloud of skirmishers, its railgun punching through their point defense gauntlets like paper. Break and they pick you off one by one. Stay together. Tucker dove into the fray without hesitation. His hyper-mega launcher cycled up and spat coherent death, punching a hole clean through a Phantom before it could drop its troops into the secondary battery positions. The explosion was beautiful and terrible, scattering burning debris across the beach. He transformed to Wave Rider mode without thinking, skimming the wave tops to evade a volley of beam fire from a Gira Zulu that had marked him. The ocean spray mixed with burning hydraulic fluid from a dozen dying machines. Above him, the sky was a tapestry of fire. The Sinanju hadn't moved. It still hung there, hovering at the edge of the battlefield, watching. Waiting. Its mono eye tracked the flow of battle with the patience of a predator that knew its prey had nowhere to run. Why isn't it attacking? What are you waiting for? His answer came from the Kraken's maw. A concentrated blast from its main energy projector lanced down, not aimed at the ships, not at the mecha, but at the very cliffs beneath Arsenal's primary defense laser. The mountain-sized weapon, generations of Norma engineering and sacrifice, simply ceased to exist. The beam carved through rock and reinforcement like a knife through butter, and the entire emplacement slumped, cracked, and then fell, taking 2 para-male squads and a UNSC Wolverine missile launcher with it into the sea. The shockwave hit Tucker's Zeta like a giant's fist, tumbling him end over end before his stabilizers caught and leveled him out. A new voice cut across the general channel, smooth, cold, amplified with the unmistakable resonance of someone who believed absolutely in his own superiority. People of Arsenal. Displaced warriors of Earth's countless wars. It was full frontal, his tone carrying the weight of a judgment already past. You fight with the courage of the doomed. It is, almost admirable. But courage without purpose is merely noise. Tucker's teeth ground together. Oh, this guy. Lay down your arms, full frontal continued. Your destruction is not our primary objective, merely a necessary step. Resist, and you will be erased. Not as enemies, you are not worthy of that title. But as obstacles. There is a difference. For a single, terrible moment, the firing seemed to hesitate. Pilots on both sides, soldiers in the trenches, crews on the ships, all heard those words. All felt the weight of them. Then Captain Cutter's response came, and it was exactly what Tucker needed to hear. All units, ignore the propaganda. The captain's voice was calm, steady, the voice of a man who had faced down the Covenant, the Flood, and the Banished, and was not about to be impressed by a man in a red suit. Focus fire on that assault carrier. Mac gun, target the central hull. Fire when ready. The spirit of fire shuddered as its magnetic accelerator cannon roared. The tungsten projectile, a spear of man-made fury weighing 600 tons, crossed the distance in less than a heartbeat. And impacted a shimmering, hexagonal energy barrier that flared to life around the Kraken's maw. Forerunner technology. Point defense shields, the same kind that had protected Covenant capital ships for decades. The impact sent ripples of light across the barrier's surface, but it held. The round shattered into fragments that harmlessly dissipated. The shield held. A low, rumbling laugh echoed across the Banished channel. This voice was different, deeper, older, carrying the weight of 100 conquered worlds and 1,000 broken enemies. Atriox. Your best weapon. The Banished Warmaster's voice was almost contemplative. A flick against our shield. Impressive, for humans. Truly. But you have never faced us before. Not really. Now witness ours. Bays opened along the carrier's underbelly. Dozens of drop pods, larger than any before, larger than any Tucker had ever seen in any war, fired towards the surface. They didn't carry infantry. They couldn't. They carried scarabs. 4 of them. The monstrous, walking excavation platforms, each one a city block-sized engine of destruction, slammed into the shallow waters around Arsenal with impacts that sent tidal waves crashing against the island's shores. They rose with earth-shaking groans, their multiple legs finding purchase on the seabed, their massive focus beams already powering up with that terrible whine that promised absolute annihilation. The first beam lanced out. Not at the defenders, at the island itself. At the foundations of Arsenal. At the rock that had sheltered Norma for generations. The situation was cascading from desperate to catastrophic. The beachhead was solidified, Banished and Xeon forces were pushing inland against determined resistance. The carrier's shield was impregnable to their heaviest conventional weapons. The scarabs were systematically carving the island apart beneath their feet. And the Sinanju finally moved. It drew its beam rifle in one smooth motion and accelerated, not towards the heaviest fighting, not towards the defenders' strongest positions, but on a vector that would take it around the battle entirely. Towards the hidden dry docks. Towards the maintenance bays. Towards the Spirit of Fire and the Gundams undergoing hasty repairs. Its target was clear: decapitate the Alliance's technological heart. Destroy their ability to fight. Leave them with nothing but infantry in desperation against a foe that outgunned them in every conceivable way. Tucker saw the move. He felt it, that cold intent burning through his enhanced senses like a beacon. Without conscious thought, he wrenched his controls, transforming back to mobile suit mode and boosting to intercept at maximum power. Amuro. Setsuna. His voice was raw with urgency. That red bastard's heading for the hangars. He's going for the ships. I see it. Amuro's voice was calm, but there was an edge in it that Tucker had never heard before. The high new Gundam, still sporting its heavy weapon system from artillery support, broke off from its position and turned. Its fin funnel rack deployed, the remote weapons forming a defensive ring around the new as it accelerated. We cannot let it reach the ships. If the Spirit falls, we lose everything. Setsuna's OO-Kan-T was already a streak of green light. He intercepted the Sinanju in a shower of sparks as their beam sabers clashed, the force of the impact sending shockwaves across the water below. This presence. Setsuna's voice was soft, almost wondering. It is empty. A shadow wearing a legend's shape. There is no soul here. Only purpose. Full Frontal's voice came through, directed specifically at them now. At Amuro. At Setsuna. At everything they represented. Amuro Ray. The failed symbol of a stagnant Earth, clinging to a machine that should have been retired decades ago. The Sinanju disengaged from Setsuna with a burst of its thrusters, spinning to fire its beam rifle at the approaching Hainu. Amuro blocked with his shield, the impact shuddering through his frame but holding. And the Gundam Meister, chasing a dialogue that will never come, preaching understanding to a universe that only understands force. You are relics. Both of you. Your resistance here is meaningless, a footnote in a story that has already ended. Amuro's funnels lanced out, forcing the Sinanju into an evasive spiral. Meaning, Amuro retorted, and his voice carried the weight of every battle he had ever fought, every friend he had ever lost, every hope he had ever refused to surrender, is what we fight for. Something your perfect calculation will never understand. Tucker arrived, adding his mega launcher fire to the mix. The Sinanju twisted impossibly, the beam passing so close it scorched its shoulder armor, and Tucker felt a moment of savage satisfaction, until the Crimson Mobile Suit's return fire forced him to break off. The three of them dueling the Sinanju was a spectacle of light and fury that drew eyes across the battlefield. Beam fire crossed with beam fire. Funnels danced with vernier bursts. Mobile suits that should have been generations apart fought as equals, pilots pushing themselves and their machines to the absolute limit. But Tucker could feel it, the pressure of the larger battle collapsing around them. The Scarabs were advancing, their focus beams systematically reducing Arsenal's defenses to slag. The banished troops were pushing the UNSC Marines and Norma back, inch by bloody inch, towards the interior. A Lich crashed into the maintenance bay, disgorging Jiralhanai berserkers who tore through the repair crews before Spartan Red Team could intercept. They were holding the line. But just barely. And the line was starting to crack. In his cockpit, Tucker gritted his teeth until his jaw ached. That strange new sense was screaming at him now, not just the enemy pilots but something else. Something waiting. Behind the Sinanju, behind the Kraken's maw, behind the scarred hulls of banished warships and the mono-eyed gaze of Zeon mobile suits, he could feel them. The cold, calculating gaze of Ribbon's Almark, watching from somewhere beyond, measuring, evaluating, waiting. And behind that, worse than that, the smug, omnipotent patience of Embryo. The feeling of being watched by something that found this entire battle entertaining. Something that could end it whenever it chose, but preferred to watch them struggle first. This was just the first wave. The hammer blow. The opening move in a game whose rules they didn't know. The war for survival had truly begun. And they were losing. Below, in the ruins of what had once been a Norma dormitory, a young girl clutched her younger sister and prayed to gods she had never believed in. Outside, the sounds of battle grew closer. On the bridge of the Spirit of Fire, Captain Cutter watched his Mac gun recharge and calculated how many minutes they had before the Scarabs reached the island's power core. In the maintenance bay, Sergeant Forge fired his shotgun into a Giroline's face and wondered if this was the day he finally didn't get back up. And in the cockpit of the Zeta Gundam, Tucker blocked the Sinanju's beam saber with his shield and thought. We need a miracle. And we need it now. Chapter 12. The Miracle. The battle had descended into pure chaos. Tucker's Zeta Gundam 3A type danced through the maelstrom, beam sabers flashing as he carved through another pair of Zaku's. But for every one he destroyed, 3 more seemed to take its place. The sky was thick with mobile suits, Neo-Zeon forces pouring through like locusts, their mono eyes burning with cold purpose. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Tucker grunted, wrenching his controls hard left to avoid a stream of machine gun fire from a Rick Diaz. The suit spun, transforming to Waverider mode as he boosted through a gap that shouldn't have existed. Behind him, a Gelgoog's beam rifle shot vaporized the space he'd occupied a split second earlier. The UNSC had become a killing field. Amuro's high new Gundam was a blur of white and black, its funnels weaving an intricate web of death. Each remote weapon found its mark with new-type precision, a Dryson here, a Zaku 3 there, a Gaza D exploding as its reactor was punctured. But Amuro's face was grim behind his visor. He could feel them. So many hostile presences. So much killing intent. They just keep coming, Chanagi's voice crackled over the comm from the Rock Halem's bridge. Amuro, we're detecting more signatures emerging from the rift. I know, Amuro replied calmly, though his hands moved across the controls with desperate speed. I know. Setsuna's 007 sword was in its element. The GN particles trailing from its frame created afterimages as the Gundam Meister carved through Alaw's GNXs with mechanical efficiency. His face was expressionless, but his eyes held a fire that had never dimmed, the fire of someone who believed absolutely in his cause. We are outnumbered 3-1, Setsuna observed quietly. This is not sustainable. No shit. Tucker yelled back, transforming again to avoid a Dwaj Customs heat saber. Lacan, we could really use some help here. From his perch on a distant cliff, Lyle Delandy's Dynames tracked across the battlefield. His finger squeezed the trigger, and a beam round crossed kilometers in an instant, punching through a banished Phantom just as it prepared to deploy troops directly onto the Arsenal runway. I'm doing what I can. Lyle shouted back, but there's only one of me and about 1,000 of them. The banished forces had committed fully now. Type 26 assault gun carriages pounded the coastal defenses while marauders swept around the flanks, their plasma cannons reducing Norma bunkers to slag. Jirulhanai warriors howled as they charged, their gravity hammers leaving craters where UNSC Marines had stood moments before. Captain James Cutter watched from the Spirit of Fire's bridge, his jaw set like granite. The tactical display was a nightmare of red icons, far too many red icons. Evacuation status. He asked quietly. 63% of Norma non-combatants have been moved to the inner shelters, Anders reported, her face pale. But the Scarabs are targeting the power grid. If they take out the main reactor. They won't, Cutter interrupted. Because we won't let them. Jerome. Spartan Jerome 92's voice came through, steady despite the explosions that rattled his comm. Red team is engaging Scarab Alpha. Douglas is on the leg joints. Alice is providing cover. We'll bring it down, sir. Do it, Spartan. On the Arsenal command deck, Jill watched the battle with her cybernetic eye whirring, calculating, despairing. Macron cannon status. She demanded. Still charging, Emma reported. The Xeon forces have been targeting our capacitors. We're at 62%. Too slow. Jill slammed her fist on the console. At this rate. A massive explosion rocked the island. One of the Scarabs had found the secondary missile silo. The resulting fireball consumed 3 paramale units and 2 squads of Hellbringers. Zola's Vilcus spun through the debris, its railgun spitting death at the skirmishers who tried to exploit the breach. Jill. We can't hold much longer. The eastern line is about to collapse. Hold it. Jill barked. If they break through, they'll be at the shelters in minutes. Captain Bright Noah stood beside her, his face carrying the weight of decades of war. He had seen this before, the slow, inexorable crush of superior numbers. At Abaoku, at Axis, at so many battlefields where hope had seemed like a luxury. This is almost like the end, he said quietly, so quietly that only Jill could hear. Please, let there be a miracle. Jill said nothing. She had stopped believing in miracles long ago. And then the sky tore open again. But this time, it wasn't purple. This time, it was gold. The fighting stopped. Not by choice, but because every sensor on both sides screamed at once. A new portal had punched through the fabric of reality, and what emerged from it was unexpected. Tucker's Zeta skidded to a halt, his beam saber still raised. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," he breathed. The first thing through was a Gundam. But not just any Gundam, a massive, blocky shape with twin beam cannons mounted on its shoulders, GN particles streaming from its frame like wings of light. GN005 Gundam Virtue. And behind it, GN008 Saravi Gundam. A voice crackled across all frequencies, calm, measured, and impossibly familiar to three people on the battlefield. "Apologies for taking so long. Better late than never." Tieria Erde's voice was exactly as Setsuna and Lyle remembered it. Cold, precise, but underneath, something warmer than there had ever been before. Behind the Gundams came ships, frigates and assault carriers bearing insignia that made Captain Cutter's eyes widen. UNSC designs, but different. Advanced. And behind them, something that made Amuro's new type senses flare like a supernova. Mobile suits. Dozens of them, but not like any he had seen before. The She Gundam descended through the portal like an angel of judgment, its Minovsky flight system creating a halo of light around its frame. And within it, Amuro could feel a presence, familiar and foreign all at once. New type. Strong. And somehow, older than it should be. "That's..." Amuro's voice caught. "That's Hathaway." But ease. A child. Hathaway Noah was a child. But the presence in that mobile suit was a man. A soldier. Someone who had seen too much and done too much. "What happened to you?" Amuro thought. "What did you become?" The newcomers didn't hesitate. Gundam Virtue's beam cannons fired, twin lances of annihilation that carved through a squadron of GNXs like they were paper. The UNSC ships added their Mach rounds to the chaos, targeting the banished carriers with precision that spoke of years of experience. And the mobile suits, the MAF-T mobile suits, Tucker would later learn, descended on the Neo-Zeon forces like wolves on sheep. But it was the last arrivals that made even the Jiralhanai pause. Dragons. Not the dragons of Arsenal, though Salamandine and her kin were already fighting alongside the defenders. These were different, larger, armored, and on their backs, they carried mobile suits. The Ryushenko. Dragon-mounted mobile suits, their weapons blazing as they swept across the battlefield. And at their lead, piloted by a figure that made Salamandine's eyes widen with recognition. Salamander, she breathed. Her brother. Alive. And here. Full-frontal Sananju hovered at the edge of the battle, its mono-eye tracking the newcomers with calculating precision. For the first time since this campaign began, uncertainty flickered across his features. Well, now. This is unexpected. The calculation had changed. New variables. New threats. And behind him, he could feel Ribbons Almark's irritation like a physical pressure. "All forces, full frontal commanded," his voice carrying across the Neo-Zeon channels. "Disengage. Fall back to Rally Point Delta." "What?" Hill Dawson's voice was incredulous. "We have them. We're winning." "We were winning," full frontal corrected. "The equation has changed. We will regroup and recalculate. Now." On the banished side, Atriox watched the newcomers with an expression that might have been respect. Or might have been hunger. It was hard to tell with Jiralhanai. "Clever," he rumbled. "Very clever. Colony, signal the fleet. We're leaving." "But Warmaster," Decimus began. "I said leaving. We'll find another way to break them. One where they don't get surprise reinforcements." Atriox's eyes narrowed. "Besides, I want to see what our allies do next." A crimson portal ripped open behind the enemy forces, different from the gold one that had brought salvation. Through it, the banished and Neo-Zeon forces retreated, their ships and mobile suits disappearing into its depths. And then they were gone. The silence that followed was deafening. Tucker's Zeta Gundam hung in the air, his breathing ragged, his hands shaking on the controls. Around him, the battlefield was littered with wreckage, Neo-Zeon, banished, UNSC, Norma. So much death, so much destruction. But they were alive. They were alive. "Oh, shit," Tucker said weakly. "That actually worked." Chapter 13, Reunion and Explanation. The aftermath was almost as chaotic as the battle itself. Medics and engineers swarmed across the battlefield, treating the wounded and assessing the damage. The Norma non-combatants emerged from their shelters to find their homes scarred and smoking, but standing. The scarabs had been destroyed, Spartan Red Team had seen to that, but their impact craters would take years to repair. In the Spirit of Fire's command center, Captain Cutter allowed himself a moment of relief before the work began again. Damage reports, he asked. Significant, but not catastrophic, Anders reported. The Macron cannon is still operational. We lost 12 para-male units and their pilots. UNSC casualties are heavy. But we held. Cutter nodded slowly. Thank God. Jill stood beside him, her cybernetic eye fixed on the displays showing the newcomers. Normally, I would be surprised by something like this. But after everything we've seen, miracles do happen, Cutter finished. Apparently. Yes, apparently. On the landing field, the She Gundam touched down with surprising gentleness for such a massive machine. Its cockpit opened, and Hathaway Noah emerged, not the boy Bright Noah remembered, but a man. Taller. Harder. His eyes carried the weight of choices made and consequences accepted. He saluted, a soldier's salute, crisp and professional. But when he looked at his father, something cracked behind those eyes. Bright Noah stared at his son. His adult son. The son who had been a child just days ago in his own timeline. The son who piloted a mobile suit that shouldn't exist for decades. I cannot believe it, Bright said slowly. You're different. You've matured. Over the past few days. Amuro added, landing the high noon nearby. Hathaway, what happened to you? Hathaway's jaw tightened. He looked at his father, at the man who had raised him, who had taught him what it meant to be a soldier, who had no idea what his son had done. What he had become. He looked away. The memories surged, Chan's face, the explosion, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. He had done terrible things. For what he believed was right. But that didn't make them less terrible. And then, without a word, he stepped forward and wrapped his arms around his father. I'm sorry, Hathaway whispered, his voice breaking. Forgive me. Please, forgive me. Bright Noah stood frozen for a moment. Then his arms came up, slowly, and held his son. Whatever Hathaway had done, whatever he had become, he was still Bright's son. Still the boy who had looked up at the stars and asked what it meant to be a hero. Whatever it is, Bright said quietly, we'll face it together. That's what family does. Nearby, the Gundam Meisters had their own reunion. Tieria Erde descended from the Virtue's cockpit with the same cool composure he had always worn. But when Setsuna approached, something shifted in his expression, a softening, almost, that would have been unthinkable in the old days. It is good to have the team back together, Lacan said, clapping Tieria on the shoulder. Well, 3/4 of us, anyway. Setsuna smiled. Actually smiled. It was small, barely there, but unmistakable. Welcome back, Tieria. Tieria nodded. The situation is more complex than we anticipated. But we will adapt. We always do. In a quieter corner of the base, Jill faced a different kind of reunion. Salamandine stood before her, no longer in dragon form but in the human shape she had once worn. Beside her stood another, a dragon Jill had never met, but whose resemblance to Salamandine was unmistakable. You said your name was Salamander, Jill said carefully. Yes. The dragon's voice was deep, resonant. I am Salamandine's brother. And I bring news you will not want to hear. We've had a lot of that lately, Jill replied. What is it? Salamander explained. About Embryo. About his plan to create a world of mana, a world where those without magic, like the Norma, would have no place. About the alliance he had forged with forces from other worlds, Ribbons Almark and his A-Laws, Full Frontal and his Neo-Zeon, Atriox and his Banished. Together, they seek to reshape reality itself, Salamander concluded. To create a new world order where they rule supreme. And they will destroy anyone who stands in their way. Captain Cutter, who had joined the conversation along with Bright Noah, listened with growing horror. Those dragons, the ones we've been fighting. They were people. Once, yes. Salamandine's voice was heavy with grief. Embryo's curse transforms us, takes our minds, our souls, leaves only rage and hunger. You have been killing our kin without knowing it. Bright Noah's face was ashen. We had no idea. If we had known. You couldn't have. Salamander's voice held no accusation. You fought what you saw as monsters. We cannot blame you for that. But now you know the truth. And the question becomes, what will you do with that knowledge? Jill looked at Cutter. Cutter looked at Bright. Bright looked at his son, who had joined them silently. We fight, Hathaway said simply. We fight, and we win, and we make sure this embryo can never hurt anyone again. Salamander studied him for a long moment. Then he smiled, a predator's smile, but not an unkind one. Well spoken, human. It seems an alliance is in order. He extended his hand, his human-shaped hand, and Jill took it without hesitation. An alliance, she agreed. Against embryo. Against all of them. In a pocket dimension outside of time and space, embryo watched. His perfect plan had just developed a very large crack. The forces he had assembled, the Neo-Zeon, the A-Laws, the Banished, had been driven back. The Defenders had not only survived but gained new allies. Dragons, of all things. Dragons fighting alongside the very people who had hunted them. This is troublesome, he admitted. Behind him, Ribbon's Almark's holographic form flickered with irritation. Your underestimation of the enemy has compromised the operation. My underestimation. Embryo's voice was silk over steel. Your forces were equally ineffective, Almark. The Sinanju accomplished nothing. Your A-Laws were routed. They were surprised. There is a difference. Semantics. Embryo turned away from the viewing screen. No matter. We will simply accelerate the timeline. Full frontal, what is the status of the weapon? Full frontal's image appeared, cold and composed. The satellite laser is operational. It can be brought to bear on any target within this system. Excellent. Embryo's smile was terrible to behold. Then let us give our new friends a proper welcome. Target the Mitsurugi Empire. Let them see what happens to those who oppose us. And the Norma, the UNSC forces. They will watch. They will despair. And when they are broken, we will finish them. Embryo's eyes gleamed with ancient malice. This game is far from over. On Arsenal, the Defenders worked through the night. Repairs were begun. The dead were mourned. Alliances were forged and strengthened. And somewhere in the chaos, Tucker found himself alone on a cliff overlooking the sea, staring at the stars. Footsteps approached. He didn't turn. Shouldn't you be celebrating or something? He asked. Amuro Ray stopped beside him, his new type senses tingling at the edge of Tucker's mind. I don't feel much like celebrating. Yeah. Tucker was quiet for a moment. I keep seeing them, you know. The ones I couldn't save. The ones who died because I wasn't fast enough, or smart enough, or good enough. That never goes away. Amuro's voice was soft, understanding. I've been fighting for decades. It still doesn't go away. Great. Something to look forward to. They stood in silence for a long moment. Then Amuro said, you're different from when we first met. Stronger. More aware. Tucker's jaw tightened. Yeah, about that. I've been getting these feelings. These memories. Like I'm remembering things that never happened to me. AI fragments, maybe. Or something else. I don't know. Amuro nodded slowly. New types often experience something similar. Connections across time and space. Memories that aren't quite our own. It can be overwhelming. You're telling me. Tucker finally turned to face him. So what do I do about it? Live with it. Use it. Let it make you stronger instead of driving you mad. Amuro's eyes were ancient in his young face. That's all any of us can do. They stood together, watching the stars, as a new dawn began to break over Arsenal. The war was far from over. But for the first time since this nightmare began, Tucker thought they might actually have a chance. In the depths of space, the satellite laser powered up, its targeting systems locking onto a distant world. In the halls of the Mitsurugi Empire, alarms began to blare. And on Arsenal, the Defenders prepared for a battle they didn't yet know was coming. The miracle had bought them time. But time, as always, was the one thing they could never have enough of. Chapter 14. The Fall of the Mitsurugi Empire. The satellite weapon hung in the void like a mechanical moon, its massive focusing array gleaming with malevolent purpose. On the bridge of the Spirit of Fire, long-range sensors detected the energy buildup, a spike of power unlike anything the Allied forces had seen. Captain, I'm reading massive energy readings from the Mitsurugi capital region, Anders reported, her voice tight with alarm. It's coming from orbit. Cutter's jaw tightened. Show me. The viewscreen flickered to life, displaying a nightmare. A satellite weapon of terrifying scale had positioned itself directly over the Mitsurugi Empire's capital city. Even as they watched, its primary cannon began to glow with building fire. On that weapon's command deck, Ribbons Almark observed the charging sequence with clinical detachment. Around him, mass-produced Innovades moved with synchronized precision, monitoring systems and running diagnostics. Beside him stood a holographic projection of Atriox, the banished warlord's massive form crackling with barely contained aggression. Their capital will be erased, Ribbons stated calmly. A necessary pruning. Felix stood among a new collection of allies, space pirates in salvaged armor, insurrectionist remnants from forgotten colonies, and one figure who should have been dead. Sharkface, now more machine than man, cybernetic implants replacing most of his burned body, stood in silence. Behind them loomed the angular forms of Titan's mobile suits, relics of a brutal era, Gaplants, GM Kells, and the massive Gundam MKV that Felix himself would pilot. "We're not here to watch fireworks," Felix said, his voice cold. "We're here to clean up what's left." "Patience," Ribbons replied. "The demonstration comes first." The satellite fired. A column of plasma, vast enough to engulf the entire capital city, descended from the heavens. It struck with the fury of a star-going nova. The imperial palace, seat of the Mitsurugi dynasty for centuries, vanished in the first microsecond. The grand cathedrals of Mana, the noble quarters, the merchant districts, the homes of millions, all consumed by white-hot annihilation. When the light faded, nothing remained but a glassy crater where a civilization's heart had once beaten. On Arsenal, the news hit like a physical blow. Ange stood in the command center, her face frozen as the reports came in. The capital, her home, her family, not that they deserved the title anymore, gone. Erased. Every person she had grown up with, every face she had known, every corner of the city she had explored as a princess. Gone. Emma reached out to steady her. "Ange, don't." Ange's voice was hollow. She pulled away, walking to the window that overlooked the sea. The people here had treated her as one of them now, a Norma, an outcast. She had begun to accept it. To build something new. But this, they deserved it, a cold voice whispered in her mind. "Julio betrayed you." Your mother stood silent. The nobles cheered when I was outed. She shook her head violently. No, not all of them. The servants who had been kind. The children who hadn't understood. The common people who had only ever known what they were taught. A hand rested on her shoulder. She turned to find Tucker there, his aquamarine armor scuffed from recent training, his helmet tucked under his arm. He said nothing. He just stood with her, looking out at the same sea. After a long moment, he spoke quietly. "When the meta was in my head, when I killed people I cared about. I thought about ending it. Thought about just letting go." He glanced at her. "Didn't. Here I am. Doesn't mean I'm okay. Just means I'm still here." Ange met his eyes. There was understanding there, not pity, not empty comfort. Just the shared weight of survival. "Who did this?" she asked. Ribbons Almark, Setsuna's voice came from behind them. The Gundam Meister stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning with cold fire. "The Innovate who betrayed celestial being. He seeks to guide humanity through destruction. Then we stop him," Ange said, her voice hardening. "All of us." Tucker nodded slowly. "Yeah, we do." Outside, the first ships of the Allied fleet were already moving into formation. The final war had begun. Chapter 15, The Final War, Part 1. The days following the destruction of the Mitsurugi capital were a blur of preparation and grief. But grief, the soldiers of three universes knew, was a luxury they couldn't afford. Not yet. In the main hangar of the Spirit of Fire, engineers worked around the clock. The UNSC supply lines had been stretched thin, but sympathetic nations, horrified by the satellite attack, had quietly provided materials. No one wanted to openly defy the new threat, but no one wanted to stand with the destroyers either. Tucker stood before his new machines. The MSZ-006-3 Zeta Gundam, Strike Zeta, was a thing of beauty, refined lines, upgraded thrusters, and a weapons loadout that made his previous Zeta look like a training suit. Beside it, the MSN-001X Gundam Delta Kai gleamed in its transformed Waverider configuration, protofunnels docked along its hull. "Quite the upgrade," a voice observed. Hathaway Noah approached, His MAF-T uniform crisp, his eyes carrying the weight of a man who had chosen the path of terrorism for what he believed was right. Behind him, the massive form of the She Gundam dominated its own bay, its Minovsky flight system promising unparalleled atmospheric mobility. "Had to keep up with you legends somehow," Tucker replied, a ghost of his old smirk appearing. "Your father's already chewed me out twice this week. Don't need you doing it too." Hathaway's expression softened fractionally. "My father cares about all of us, even the ones who fall." He looked at the Strike Zeta. "When this is over, perhaps we can discuss what justice really means. In a galaxy that might finally be ready to listen." Tucker nodded slowly. "Yeah, maybe." In the war room, the commanders gathered one final time. Captain Cutter stood at the head of the table, his uniform crisp, his expression carved from stone. Beside him, Jill of Arsenal represented the Norma and their dragon allies. Salamandine and the others had pledged their strength, recognizing Embryo as a threat to all life, not just humans. Bright Noah sat with the calm authority of a man who had faced annihilation more times than he could count. "I won't lie to you," Cutter began. "The enemy has the advantage. Ribbons Almark's Innovades, the banished war machine, Full Frontal's Neo-Zeon forces, and now this Neon insurrectionist group led by a traitor named Felix. They have numbers. They have firepower. They have a fortified position in a pocket universe we barely understand." He paused, letting the weight settle. "But they don't have what we have." He looked at each of them in turn. "They don't have people fighting for something more than conquest. They don't have pilots who've crossed the void between worlds to stand together. They don't have Norma who've been told their entire lives they're worthless, standing tall in mechs they built with their own hands. They don't have Spartans. They don't have new types. They don't have Gundam Meisters." Jill nodded slowly. "We will not force anyone to fight. But those who do, we will remember." Bright rose. "Londo Bell stands ready. All mobile suit teams are at full combat readiness. Hathaway's MAF-T forces have integrated with our tactical networks. If this is the final battle, we will make it one they regret starting." Setsuna spoke from the shadows, his voice quiet but carrying. "The OO-Con-T is capable of quantum teleportation. If we can breach their pocket dimension, I can open a stable portal for the fleet." "Do it," Cutter ordered. "All forces, prepare for immediate deployment. This is it, the beginning of the end." The portal opened like a wound in reality. Beyond it, a pocket universe stretched, an artificial construct of distorted space and twisted gravity, filled with the warships of 3 converging enemies. Banished CAS assault carriers hung beside Neo-Zeon warships, their hulls bristling with weapons. Ayla's mobile suits patrolled in formation alongside Titan's remnants. And at the center, the satellite weapon, repositioned and recharging, loomed over everything. Ribbons Almark sat in the cockpit of the Reborn's Gundam, his expression serene. Beside him, Atriox's hologram grinned with savage anticipation. Full Frontal Sinanju floated in the void, its pilot's masked face unreadable. And Felix, in the massive Gundam MKV, waited with the patience of a predator. "So," Ribbons murmured, "they come. Good. Let us show them the price of defiance." On the opposite side of the portal, the Allied fleet began its advance. The Spirit of Fire led the line, its Mach guns charged and ready. 3 Ra-Kalem-class battleships flanked it, their beam cannons gleaming. Klopp-class cruisers provided screening support. Behind them, the UNSC's Paris-class frigates formed a second line, their Archer missile pods loaded and armed. Mobile suits launched in waves. Londo Bell's Gigans and Jettas formed the first wave, their high-streamer variants moving with enhanced speed. MAF-T's Messers followed, their heavier armor promising durability in the coming chaos. The Gundams, Hi-Nu, Shi, 007 Sword, Dynames, Virtue, Saravi, moved like living legends among them. Para-males launched from Arsenal's carriers, their pilots, Ange, Hilda, Salia, Rosalie, Chris, Zola, ready to prove that Norma were far from worthless. And beside them flew the dragons, Salamandine's massive form leading Aura, Naga, and the others. Tucker launched in the Delta Chi, its Waverider form slicing through the portal's edge. The Strike Zeta waited in reserve, ready to deploy when needed. His new-typed senses, still raw and developing, screamed with the weight of the coming battle. "All units," Cutter's voice echoed across the fleet channel. "This is it. For everyone we've lost. For everyone who trusted us. For every world that deserves better than this. Engage. Quote. The final war had begun. Chapter 16. The Final War, Part 2. The pocket universe became a cauldron of fire. Beam weapons crisscrossed the void, painting it in shades of crimson, emerald, and gold. Explosions bloomed like terrible flowers as ships died and mobile suits were torn apart. The roar of battle, transmitted through speakers and felt through vibrations, was deafening. Bright Noah stood on the bridge of the rock Calum, his expression carved from granite. All batteries, continuous fire. Target their capital ships. Don't let them regroup. The ship's main guns thundered, sending nuclear warheads screaming toward the banished lines. They detonated among the alien vessels, the unfamiliar technology of the UNSC's archaic weapons proving surprisingly effective against shields designed to deflect energy rather than kinetics. Hathaway's She Gundam moved through the chaos like a ghost, its Minovsky flight system allowing maneuvers that defied physics. Missile pods opened, sending a swarm of projectiles into a formation of Gaza D mobile suits. They scattered, but not fast enough, half were consumed in the explosions. You may be powerful, Hathaway muttered, but I have learned from the best. Tucker transformed the Delta Chi to mobile suit mode, his protofunnels detaching and spreading around him. The new type sense that Amuro had helped him understand was screaming, not just with danger, but with recognition. A massive shape loomed before him. The ORX-013 Gundam MKV, its distinctive silhouette unmistakable. Its cockpit housed a pilot Tucker knew, had fought, had lost, had mourned. Felix. The MKV's mono eye gleamed. Miss me, Tucker. Tucker's jaw tightened. You're supposed to be dead. After chorus, after everything. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Felix's voice dripped with contempt. I found better employers. Ones who appreciate my talents. The MKV raised its beam rifle. Tucker's funnels interposed themselves, creating a barrier that deflected the shot. You always were full of shit, Felix. Tucker drew the Delta Chi's beam saber. Let's finish this. They clashed, the modified Gundam against the Titan's prototype, beam weapons screeching against each other. Felix was skilled, his months of fighting with the insurrectionists having honed his already dangerous abilities. But Tucker had changed. The new type potential awakened within him, the training with Amuro, the sheer stubborn refusal to die, it all came together. Felix deployed his wired incoms, the remote weapons darting toward Tucker from unexpected angles. But Tucker's protofunnels matched them, creating a defensive web that caught each attack. Can't handle me, Felix. Tucker goaded. You always were better at running than fighting. Felix's response was cut short as a precisely aimed shot from Locus's GM Sniper 3 tore through one of the MKV's incom pods. The traitor's machine staggered. Focus on your enemy, Felix, Locus's cold voice transmitted. I am merely correcting an old mistake. Sharkface's Despada lunged toward Locus, its heavy weapons blazing. You, traitor, you think you can just. Locus's GM Sniper moved with mechanical precision, dodging the barrage and returning fire. His shots weren't meant to kill, not yet. They were meant to guide. Felix called you a failure, Locus observed calmly. I see he was right. Sharkface's rage boiled over, his attacks becoming wilder, more predictable. Locus simply waited, then fired once, a single shot that tore through the Despada's remaining weapons pod and sent it spinning. Amuro faced full frontal. The Sinanju was everything legend claimed, fast, powerful, piloted by a man who had made himself the perfect vessel for Char's legacy. But Amuro had fought the real Char. Had matched him, beaten him, survived him. You fight well, White Devil, full frontal acknowledged, his Sinanju dodging a salvo of fin funnel fire. But you fight for a world that discarded you. I fight so no one else has to be discarded. Amuro's High Nu raised its mega beam rifle. That's enough. The Sinanju charged. The High Nu met it. Their beam sabers crossed in a shower of particles that illuminated the void around them. Setsuna faced ribbons. The Reborn's Gundam shifted between mobile suit and cannon modes, its GN particles flaring with each transformation. Ribbons smiled his serene, infuriating smile. Setsuna. Still chasing your impossible dream of understanding. Setsuna's 007 sword activated Trans-Am, green light blazing from every surface. I no longer chase. I find. They moved faster than thought, their GN drives pushing them to speeds that would have destroyed lesser machines. Ribbons fired, Setsuna dodged. Setsuna struck, Ribbons parried. Each knew the other's techniques, had studied them, prepared for them. But Setsuna had something Ribbons lacked. Not power, not skill, purpose. Trans-Am burst. The O particles expanded, creating a field that connected every allied pilot in the battle. For a single, eternal moment, they all understood each other, their fears, their hopes, their determination. Ribbons stared, his perfect composure cracking. What is this? Communication, Setsuna replied. The one thing you will never understand. Tierra's Saravi Gundam unleashed its full power, its massive GN bazooka carving through a banished carrier with a single shot. The explosion lit up the pocket universe, debris scattering in all directions. Target eliminated, Tierra reported calmly. Moving to support the main fleet. Tucker pressed his advantage, the Delta Chi's proto-funnels finally overwhelming the MKV's defenses. A beam saber slash removed the enemy Gundam's arms. Another pierced its chest, narrowly missing the cockpit. Felix stared in disbelief as his machine died around him. This isn't. This is for everyone you betrayed. Tucker's voice was cold. For Chorus. For the UNSC. For every life you threw away. A final shot from Locus's sniper rifle pierced the MKV's cockpit. Felix had no time to scream. The satellite weapon was charging again. All forces, Cutter ordered, concentrate fire on that satellite. We cannot let it fire again. The Spirit of Fire's MAC guns thundered, their rounds slamming into the weapon's defenses. Londo Bell's battleships added their fire. The Gundams, Hi-Nu, Shi, 00, Saravi, unleashed everything they had. The satellite's shields flickered, strained, and failed. The final volley tore it apart. But Embryo was not done. As the Allied forces celebrated, a single para-male, unlike any they had seen, emerged from the debris. It was Embryo's personal machine, its weapons already cycling. It targeted the Delta Chi. Tucker barely had time to react as beam fire rained down. His proto-funnels formed a barrier, but the shots were too concentrated, too precise. The barrier held, barely. Impressive, Embryo's voice came through. But you cannot protect everyone forever. Tucker transformed to Waverider mode, charging toward the enemy. Embryo met him head-on, their machines colliding in a shower of sparks. They crashed onto a drifting piece of debris, a fragment of some forgotten ship, and emerged from their cockpits, swords drawn. Embryo studied Tucker with something like respect. For a simple soldier, you have become intriguing. The power within you, the new type potential, the AI fragments that still echo in your mind, it is extraordinary. Tucker ignited his energy sword, its plasma blade humming. Who knows? Maybe I'm just lucky. Lucky. Embryo laughed. There is no luck, only will. And I will wreck your shit. Tucker charged. They clashed. Energy sword against the strange blade Embryo wielded. Sparks flew as they circled each other, trading blows that would have killed normal men. But neither was normal. Tucker's new type senses screamed, not with danger, but with understanding. He could feel Embryo's intentions, his plans, his utter certainty in his own rightness. And in that moment, Tucker understood something else. You're not fighting for anything, Tucker said, blocking a strike. You just want to be right. To prove your way is the only way. Embryo's eyes narrowed. And you? What do you fight for? Tucker smiled, not his usual smirk, but something genuine. My friends. The ones who stuck with me. The ones who died. The ones who'll live because I'm here right now. He drove forward, his blade finding a gap in Embryo's guard. The energy sword pierced through, emerging from the other side. Embryo looked down at the wound, then back at Tucker. Surprise flickered across his features, then something like acceptance. Remarkable show, he whispered. Perhaps I was wrong. He collapsed. Tucker stood over him for a long moment, then raised his pistol and fired once. The body went still. Around them, the battle was ending. The Sinanju exploded, full frontal's final words lost in the fireball. Amuro watched for a moment, then turned to engage remaining enemies. The Reborn's Gundam fell to Setsuna's final strike, Ribbons Almark's expression frozen in disbelief as his machine disintegrated. Atriox's hologram flickered and died as the banished fleet, leaderless and outmatched, began a chaotic retreat. The pocket universe itself started to collapse. All forces, withdraw. Cutter ordered. Through the portal, now. The Allied fleet streamed back into normal space, their enemies broken and scattered. Tucker's Delta Chi was among the last through, its pilot watching as the pocket universe folded in on itself, taking the remnants of the Dark Axis with it. Epilogue. A new age. The Dragon universe was not what anyone expected. When the final battle ended and the pocket universe collapsed, taking the remnants of the Dark Axis with it, the Allied forces found themselves adrift. The portal that Setsuna had opened led somewhere unexpected, a realm of vast, floating continents, crystalline skies, and skies filled with dragons that regarded them not as enemies but as curious neighbors. It was Salamandine who spoke first, her ancient voice carrying across the communications channels. This is our home. The place we came from, before the distortions pulled us into your war. You are welcome here. And so they stayed. 5 years later, the city rose from the largest floating continent like a dream made manifest. They called it Unity, a name that needed no translation in any language. Its towers blended UNSC brutalist efficiency with Londo Bell's sleek Federation aesthetics, while Arsenal's influence showed in the graceful spires that caught the eternal twilight of the Dragon universe's sun. Norma walked freely through streets where humans and dragons conversed in peaceful harmony. Children, both human and dragon kin, played in plazas where mobile suits and para-males stood as monuments rather than weapons of war. The Universal Alliance had been formally established, its charter signed by Captain Cutter for the UNSC, Bright Noah for Londo Bell, Jill for the Norma, Salamandine for the Dragons, Setsuna for the Gundam Meisters, and Hathaway for MAF-T. A new military force, the United Defense Corps, combined the best elements of all their forces, ready to protect their new home from any threat that might follow. But for now, there was peace. In a small garden on the city's eastern edge, a man in gray and green armor knelt in the soil. Locus, formerly Samuel Ortez, formerly a mercenary, formerly a killer, tended his tomatoes with the same precision he had once used to line up sniper shots. You've got a gift for this, a voice observed. Locus didn't look up. Growing things requires patience. Patience requires discipline. Discipline I have. The visitor, one of the Sunray 1-to-1 members, Corporal Turpin, chuckled. Never thought I'd see the day. The great Locus, farming. People change. Locus examined a leaf carefully. Or they die. I chose to change. The hangar was quiet. 3 machines stood in silent formation. The MSZ-006-3 Zeta Gundam, Strike Zeta, the MSN-001X Gundam Delta Chi, and the original MSZ-006-3A Zeta Gundam 3A type that had started it all. They gleamed under the maintenance lights, their armor polished, their systems ready. Waiting. Tucker sat on a crate before them, his helmet beside him. Without it, he looked younger than his years of war suggested, though the lines around his eyes told their own story. Dark skin, close-cropped hair, and a face that had learned to smile through everything life threw at him. He stared at the sunset painting the Dragon universe in shades of violet and gold. The past always has a way of catching up. The memories surfaced unbidden, the AI fragments screaming in his mind, the feeling of being a puppet in his own body, the look on Sarge's face when the energy sword pierced his armor. Church's voice, silent now for years. Griff leaving, unable to face what Tucker had become. Simmons staying, because Simmons never knew when to quit. He had become the meta. He had felt what Maine felt, the hunger, the desperation, the endless noise of fragmented minds. And somehow, impossibly, he had come back. Irony's a bitch. He'd fought Felix again, killed him again, watched Locus put a bullet through the cockpit to make sure. Sharkface too, burning in his Despada as Locus's shots found their mark. The ghosts of his past, one by one, put to rest. And now here he was. In a universe full of dragons and giant robots and people who actually seemed to give a damn. Figured I might find you here. Tucker turned. Ange stood at the hangar entrance, no longer a princess, no longer a frightened refugee. She wore the practical clothes of a Universal Alliance pilot, her hair longer now, her eyes carrying the same weight as his own. She walked toward him, studying his face with open curiosity. Surprised at how you look underneath the helmet, she said. Tucker raised an eyebrow. No kidding. So that's what I look like. News to me too, some days. Ange circled him slowly, her gaze analytical rather than judgmental. Different, but not bad. Yeah, Tucker's defensive instincts kicked in. You got a problem with it. I'm black. You gonna be racist about it too. I'm used to people judging me by my color. Not at all. She stopped in front of him, meeting his eyes directly. Her expression was serious, but not hostile. If anything, there was something almost appreciative. I like what I see, she said simply. From a man such as yourself. Tucker blinked. Of all the responses he'd expected, that wasn't one of them. Thanks, I think. Ange smiled, a real smile, the kind she rarely showed anyone. You're different, Tucker. Annoying, perverted, loud, but different. You fought for me when you didn't have to. You fought for all of us. That means something. He scratched the back of his neck, suddenly awkward. Well, you know. Just doing my job. Saving the universe. Tuesday stuff. Tuesday. She shook her head, still smiling. I will never understand your references. Join the club. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the hangar in warm colors. Behind them, the three Gundams stood guard, silent witnesses to a moment of peace. So, Ange said eventually, what now? Tucker considered the question. 5 years ago, he would have made a joke. 5 years ago, he would have deflected with sarcasm and crude humor. But 5 years had taught him things. About himself. About loss. About what came after. Who knows? He shrugged. I mean, if any threats show up, we'll be ready. The Strike Zeta's still got plenty of fight in her. Delta Chi's funnels are tuned better than ever. Even the old 3A type could probably kick some ass if needed. He paused. But for now, I think I need some time off. Stress relief, you know. Maybe learn to just exist. Without a war. That sounds. Ange searched for the right word. Nice. Yeah. He glanced at her. Hey, you wanna. I will try not to act all perverted, you idiot. She backhanded his arm, but there was no real force behind it. Hey, what? Tucker rubbed his arm indignantly. I was gonna ask if you wanted to get dinner sometime. You know, like a date. Or are you racist against black people now? Ange stared at him for a long moment, then laughed. Actually laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the quiet hangar. You're kind of funny, aren't you? She said, still chuckling. I have my moments. Fine. Dinner. But you're paying. Wait, what? I just suggested. You're paying. She turned and walked toward the hangar entrance, glancing back over her shoulder. Pick me up at sunset. And don't be late. Tucker watched her go, a slow smile spreading across his face. For the first time in longer than he could remember, the future didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like a beginning. High above the city, in a tower that served as the Universal Alliance's command center, Captain Cutter stood with Bright, Noah and Jill, watching the same sunset. They'll be all right, Bright said quietly. The young ones. They always are. Cutter nodded. We built something here. Something worth protecting. Jill's cybernetic eye whirred as she scanned the city below. The Norma have a home. The dragons have allies. The soldiers have peace. She paused. It's more than I ever dared hope for. The war may not be over forever, Cutter acknowledged. Threats have a way of finding us. But for now, he allowed himself a rare smile. For now, this is enough. In the Dragon universe's endless twilight, a city called Unity thrived. Humans and dragons, Norma and soldiers, legends from a dozen different wars, all of them building something new. And somewhere in a hangar, 3 Gundams stood ready for whatever came next. But for tonight, their pilot had a date. And this is the end of this amazing epic crossover. What if you guys like it, do not forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe.